It has been 20 years since Hyun-seok left Earth and ended up in this world, and at last the day has come when he intends to defeat the great monster and save everything. Before him stands the creature, a winged demon resembling a gargoyle, watching the hero's party as it remarks that they have done well to endure this far. Among the group are the saint, the mage, the knight, and the hero himself. Despite sounding like praise, it is clearly nothing more than provocation, as all of them are at their limit. Hyun-seok finds the demon's words strange and questions what it means, especially since he himself is not in good condition either. The demon responds in kind, attacking with its ability, but the hero manages to defend himself with his spear, while the mage raises barriers to protect the group. The creature then makes it clear that if they do not submit, they will die, for that land will be transformed into its kingdom, shaped by its fangs and claws. Even so, Hyun-seok stands firm, blocking every attack and insisting that they must end this as soon as possible. Without wasting time, he hurls his spear, wrapped in the so-called flames of paradox, causing a massive explosion. Even so, the attack is not enough to defeat the demon. The battle continues in the skies, destroying everything around them, as the creature's claws manage to strike the hero despite his defenses. At one point, Hyun-seok is thrown to the ground, and the demon advances, saying that such an attack is not even capable of scratching it. Even while down, the hero questions that certainty, rises to his feet, and prepares another strike, heating the tip of his spear until it glows red hot, declaring that this blow will be more than enough to shatter all that arrogance. He then unleashes a gigantic blaze, visible even on the horizon. After the impact, the demon's crown falls, and the creature acknowledges, albeit with difficulty, that it has been defeated by a human. At that moment, Hyun-seok corrects it, making it clear that he does not belong to that world. Even so, the demon dismisses his words, and claims that even if it dies, its body will be absorbed by the land, and one day it will return. However, it soon realizes that something is wrong, as its body begins to disappear. Hyun-seok explains that the black flames consuming it are the flames of paradox, different from ordinary flames that depend on oxygen, as they use abstract concepts as fuel. Because of this, the demon's ability to revive after centuries will no longer work. Even so, the creature says that it does not matter, because the hero will never be remembered as the one who saved that world. According to it, even the people who stand beside him are waiting for him to die there. The hero admits that he already knew this, surprising the demon. The priestess tries to intervene, asking him not to listen to the monster's words, but Hyun-seok decides to reveal the truth. He exposes that the saint's attempts to seduce him were part of a plan to weaken him emotionally, since he is an outsider from another world, ensuring that at the right moment she could take part in his death without resistance. Her reaction is pure indignation, unable even to respond. Then Hyun-seok points out that the others are no different. The knight, for example, would receive a national treasure from the emperor as a reward for killing him after the demon's defeat, all out of fear that he might take the throne. When asked how he knows this, the hero simply continues, also revealing that the mage opposes him because he is against the system of slavery, making it clear that everyone there has their own interests. He states that he has known about this plan for 5 years, and even so, he kept fighting until that moment. The demon, confused by all of this, cannot understand why. Having so much power, Hyun-seok never simply destroyed that world, and everyone who betrayed him. Hyun-seok replies that he never destroyed that world because he wanted only one thing: to return home. Then the story goes back in time, explaining that 20 years earlier, in 2005 on Earth, he was actually just an ordinary man, a 30-year-old worker with a completely normal life. Everything changed when he was transported to another world by a goddess, who begged him to save that place from monsters. Hyun-seok, already familiar with manga and anime stories, quickly understood the situation, but reality proved far harsher than any fiction. As soon as he arrived, he was met with chaos and tried in every possible way to return home, only to discover that there was just one path: fulfill the goddess's request, defeat the monsters, and save the world. With no alternative, he spent 20 years fighting. He trained constantly, faced dangerous creatures, and also had to deal with ignorant and cruel people. One example of this was when he saved a child lost in a snowy forest, on the verge of death. When he brought the child back to the village, he was told it would be a waste to use medicine on someone who was practically dead. It was infuriating, but he endured it. In addition, Hyun-seok faced even more absurd problems in that world, such as the precarious conditions of medicine and hygiene. Simple infections led to amputations, and the healers were all mobilized for war, leaving the poor without any treatment. When he returned with the child, a priest claimed the child had been captured by monsters, and questioned how he managed to bring them back. While people considered heretics were burned at the stake, under the pretext of warming the city, a nun even suggested that he had survived with the help of a demon and needed to be exorcised, pressuring him to hand over the child and not go against the goddess's will. Faced with all this, Hyun-seok came to believe that the greatest problem in that world was not the monsters, but the people themselves, who did not understand basic concepts of ethics, morality, or human rights. Even so, he endured everything for 2 decades. After so much suffering, he finally raised his voice to the heavens, demanding that the goddess fulfill her promise. A divine beam descended, tearing through the corrupted clouds, and the goddess acknowledged that he had endured greatly and managed to defeat the monster through his own efforts. Hyun-seok then recalls the agreement. Once he fulfilled his mission, he would be able to return home while retaining all his memories. The goddess, however, questions whether he truly dislikes that that world, since he possesses enough power to even threaten her. She also points out that, upon returning to Earth, he will no longer be special, and will go back to being just an ordinary person. Even so, Hyun-Suk cuts off any hesitation and makes it clear that he only wants to leave, without caring about anything else. The goddess then states that that world no longer needs monsters, and asks if he will not regret his decision. He replies that he will not, because all he wants is to return. As he drops his spear and looks at his calloused and wounded hands, he thinks that he is finally freeing himself from an abandoned world. Soon after, he is enveloped by a divine beam. At that moment, the goddess reveals that his original body on Earth has already died, and therefore his soul will be placed into another body. Hyun-Seok asks what body that will be, but she simply says she cannot explain in detail, assuring him that everything will work out, and that he will survive. To him, that does not matter, because any fate is still better than remaining in that world. Thus, when he opens his eyes again, he is already on Earth. In the year 2025, the hero now inhabits the body of Yu Chan-seok, realizing he is whole again as he looks at himself in his bedroom mirror. Gradually, he confirms that he has truly returned when he turns on a faucet and sees clean water, something that did not exist in that other world. He also notices modern conveniences, such as an electric stove, realizing that he can now cook without relying on campfires or harsh conditions. Among all things, one of the simplest things he missed the most was fried chicken. The emotion of finally returning to a normal life overwhelms him. Even realizing that much has changed since 2005, Hyun-Seok, now living as Yu Chan-seok, decides that it does not matter. After everything he has been through, he just needs to adapt and move forward with his new life. While Hyun-Seok, now in Yu Chan-seok's body, was saying that he only needed to adapt, a mysterious beam of light struck the city in the distance. Without paying much attention at the time, he decided to enjoy the comfort he had regained. He took a hot shower, something that did not exist in that other world, and even enjoyed air conditioning, which felt like an absurd luxury after everything he had endured. Looking out the window, he saw a clear, bright sky, completely different from the grim scenery before, and commented to himself that being 2025, he would have to get used to many new things. However, that peace did not last long, because something strange appeared outside his window. Something clearly not human, but a monster. Soon after, an announcement began echoing through the building's loudspeakers, informing residents that a rift had appeared and that everyone needed to evacuate immediately to an underground shelter. It did not take long for multiple creatures to appear and shatter the windows, invading the place. Hyun-Seok ran, climbing the stairs while trying to understand what kind of absurd situation that was. To shake off the monsters, he even jumped out of a window and circled around, narrowly managing to escape. Along the way, he encountered a child and quickly warned that it was dangerous to stay there, saying they needed to go to the shelter. But the child's reaction was completely unexpected, as they asked if he did not want to kill the monsters too. Not understanding anything, Hyun-Seok was confused, and later the child began to explain the situation. According to them, this had already been happening on Earth for about 13 years. Rifts, also called ruptures, were points from which monsters emerged, and no one knew exactly where they came from. Even so, the child insisted they did not want to run, they wanted to fight. Trying to piece things together, Hyun-Seok confirmed whether he had understood correctly, and the child assured him that was exactly it. At that moment, he became irritated, realizing that he had spent 20 years in hell to return home, only to find Earth turned into another chaos. In his mind, this could only be the goddess's fault. When asked how he did not know any of this, he improvised, saying he had recently moved from the United States. The child believed him and even mentioned global events, making it clear that the situation was serious worldwide. Not knowing what else to say, Hyun-Seok tried to change the subject and asked about hunters, and the child began to excitedly talk about Lee Se-eun, a famous hunter, a member of the Janab Guild, and considered one of the strongest in the world, known for wielding a massive two-handed sword to eliminate monsters. Even after steering the conversation away, Hyun-Seok grew thoughtful, trying to understand how ordinary humans could fight against those creatures. However, before he could reflect further, he heard strange sounds approaching. Quickly, he covered the child's mouth and realized that several monsters were nearby. He counted 5, but soon remembered that he had fled from 6 earlier, meaning one of them was hidden. He assessed the situation, thinking that in the other world he would have dealt with it easily, but in this new body he was not sure of his capabilities. Even so, he could not simply abandon the child there. The problem was that he had no weapon, and fighting 6 monsters as an ordinary person seemed impossible. Then he felt something familiar, mana in the air. That sensation was unmistakable, just like what he knew from the other world. Without wasting time, he lunged at one of the creatures and burned its face using black flames. He realized that he could still manipulate mana, and with 20 years of experience, it was almost instinctive. The flames of paradox were still with him, engraved in his soul rather than his body. Although the power seemed weaker than before, it was still enough to deal with monsters of that level. In a short time, he was already incinerating all the creatures around him. The child was impressed and asked how he had done that. Hyun-Seok, on the other hand, felt somewhat discouraged upon realizing that, in that world, it seemed to be treated as a special ability. He simply gave a brief answer, relieved to see the boy was safe, while thinking that here they called that a unique skill. Soon after, the child ran off holding a piece of wood, saying he had learned from a hunter on YouTube that it was necessary to make sure the monsters were truly dead. He headed toward the bodies, almost putting himself in danger again. At that moment, Hyun-Seok warned that the flames of paradox do not stop burning until until the target is completely dead. In other words, if they were still burning, it meant those creatures were not dead yet. One of them leapt toward the boy, who was nearly struck, but Hyun-Suk appeared at the last second and crushed the creature with the palm of his hand. He commented that he had no idea what YouTube was, but that the kid should stop watching those things. Then he asked to borrow the stick, and as he took it, he continued holding the creature's body while it was reduced to charcoal. Even using just a piece of wood, Hyun-Suk began splitting the monsters in half with ease. The boy was amazed and wondered if he was secretly a hunter, but Hyun-Suk could only think about how disappointing all of this was. Even after finally returning to Earth, he still had to deal with that disgusting smell of blood. After everything he had gone through in that other world, this did not feel like a fair reward. To him, there was no difference between the two worlds, and that deeply irritated him. Even so, they moved forward until they finally reached the underground shelter. As soon as they arrived, the boy's mother ran toward him, clearly relieved and worried at the same time. She thanked Hyun-Suk profusely for bringing her son back safely, but he simply replied that it was nothing. That was when he took a closer look at her, noticing her fine clothes and crystal earring, and concluded that the boy was probably a spoiled rich kid, which explained a lot. The moment of relief did not last long, because the shelter suddenly began to shake. A massive creature smashed through one of the walls with a single blow. It was a gigantic mutant, eyeless and with a disproportionately large mouth, something clearly far more dangerous than the other monsters. Panic spread throughout the place. People began running without knowing where to go, since there were monsters outside as well. Trapped between threats on all sides, the boy said that this time they needed to run. Meanwhile, Hyun-Suk could only think that he had not asked for much. He only wanted to return to the world he knew, yet he still ended up in that situation. Faced with that scenario, he began to question whether he had really wished for something so impossible. Then he asked the boy if he was rich, and why he was trying to become a hunter, since he could simply live a comfortable life without having to fight. The boy explained that he had lost his father to a monster during a corrosion-type rupture that appeared near a shelter. They could not escape in time. His father stayed behind, and he survived. Even though he was not strong, and did not need to go through that, the boy said he wanted to kill monsters to help save the world. To him, it might seem like a childish dream, but it was something important. Hearing this, Hyun-Suk replied that he did not think it was stupid, and said the boy could indeed become a good hunter, but he did not need to carry the burden of saving the world alone. At that moment, the boy's mother pulled him, saying they needed to leave immediately. However, before they could escape, an extremely powerful presence appeared. The boy turned and saw Hyun-Suk facing the gigantic creature, completely burning the monster with black flames, as it was consumed entirely. After defeating the enemy, Hyun-Suk turned to the boy and made it clear that saving the world was a job for someone who had already done it before. That summed up his story well. He had been summoned to another world, fought monsters for 20 years, and after all that, finally returned to Earth. What was surprising was not the fact that he had saved another world, but that after returning, he simply did nothing about the monsters here. Even though he had once promised to save a world, he now had no interest in doing so. Instead, he spent his time playing games, eating sweets, and drinking soda, enjoying everything modern life had to offer. He had discovered incredible things like smartphones, which allowed him to do practically anything with just a few taps, and he was loving this new routine. He was even ordering food delivery through iFood, until he realized he was running out of money. The body he was using originally belonged to Yu Chan-sok, an employee of a logistics company, who ended up losing his job after the company went bankrupt due to a corrosion-type rift. He had been surviving on severance pay, but now that it had run out, Yu Chan-sok needed to find a way to support himself. He knew he would not be able to get a regular job, especially after being 20 years out of touch with the modern world. On top of that, with constant ruptures occurring, companies had become increasingly selective and were not hiring just anyone. Even so, he needed some kind of income to keep living. That was when he found a recruitment ad for hunters. Considering all the experience he already had, it seemed like an obvious choice. Later, upon arriving at the Hunter Association, he found many people gathered there for the same reason. Being a hunter had become the profession of the moment. Everyone wanted to be a hero, make money, defeat monsters, and feel powerful. However, reality was very different, because not everyone could achieve that goal, and only a few truly became famous or successful. At that moment, an extremely important figure entered the association, surrounded by several bodyguards. It was Lee Se-shun, one of the 10 strongest hunters in the world, and a member of the Janab Guild. Her presence immediately drew attention, leaving everyone excited and impressed. She was known both for her strength and her fame, so she naturally became the center of attention. Later, already at the stadium where the hunter recruitment matches were taking place, Lee Se-chun carefully observed one of the main candidates, Han Sang-ah, considered the favorite of that selection. The young woman was very promising and possessed the ability of electrokinesis, making her someone with great potential. While analyzing, Lee Se-on casually commented whether that ability could, for example, be used to recharge cell phones. One of her assistants replied that she was a hunter, not a power generator, and explained that Han Sang-ah was actually extremely skilled and had a promising future. Even so, Lee Se-on maintained a neutral stance, making it clear that only real combat could truly prove anything. Another assistant added that the academy does not expose students to truly dangerous situations, and that facing a rupture is completely different from training. Therefore, it was impossible to accurately determine the girl's real level without practical experience. Lee Se-on agreed with that view, and reinforced that tests and training are never the same as real combat. combat. She then handed a piece of candy to one of the assistants, creating a small light-hearted moment, as the other became annoyed for not receiving one as well. Even so, her thoughts were clear. Newly graduated students usually struggle to face real monsters and need time to adapt. In other words, even though she was promising, Han Sang-ah still needed to grow. Soon after, the narrator announced the start of the matches. Lee Si-yoon thought that she was there precisely to fulfill her role, to observe and choose those who truly proved their worth. At that moment, the narrator called attention to an unusual candidate. It was someone with no background in the Hunter Academy, a simple civilian who decided to participate anyway. Someone with enough courage to step into the arena without formal training. The name announced was Yu Chan-seok. Upon hearing it, Yu Chan-seok, now using that identity, still felt a certain discomfort with the new name. The rules were explained, making it clear that personal weapons were not allowed and that lethal blows were prohibited. Meanwhile, Han-seok reflected on his decision. Even though he had initially chosen that path for money, he understood that as a hunter, he would end up having to deal with the responsibility of protecting a world on the brink of collapse. Even so, deep down, all he really wanted was to live well, eat well, and enjoy life. His opponent, who also used a spear, could not believe what was happening. To him, it was absurd to face someone who had not even gone through the academy. Meanwhile, Hyun-seok knew that he needed a strong performance in that tournament to achieve his goals. As soon as the fight began, his opponent advanced with an attack wrapped in flames, confident he would win easily. However, in an instant, Hyun-seok dodged and disappeared from sight, leaving his spear behind. He reappeared beside his opponent, making it clear that he did not even need a weapon to deal with that. With quick and precise movements, he landed a punch straight to the stomach, stepped on the opponent's foot to immobilize him, and finished with a left hook. The blow was enough to bring the opponent down, who collapsed unconscious onto his knees. Without any effort, Hyun-seok realized the fight was already over. He had not even used his spear because he did not want to injure his opponent, yet he still won with extreme ease. To him, it almost felt unfair, since his opponent was clearly just a novice. In the stands, Lee Si-yoon immediately became interested and wanted to know who that candidate was. Upon reviewing his file, she discovered that he worked at a logistics company and had virtually no mana accumulated in his body, which made his performance even more unusual. One of the assistants commented that performing that kind of movement would require a large amount of mana, or it had simply been pure luck. Hearing this, Lee Se-yoon subtly handed him a piece of candy, as if signaling for him to stay quiet. She then explained that it wasn't a lack of mana, but rather an intentional absence of accumulation, something that raised even more questions about Hyun-seok's true capabilities. Meanwhile, in the arena, Hyun-seok realized he would need to prove his worth further. He approached another opponent who was still standing, reassuring him by saying it wouldn't be fatal. Then he delivered a direct punch to the face, quickly ending the fight. The result was announced, confirming Yu Chan-seok's victory. The judges began to argue intensely about what they had just witnessed, trying to understand how someone with that profile could fight in such a way. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone was focused on the evaluation, Lee Se-yoon decided to act. She wanted to see with her own eyes what he was truly capable of, so she left the stands and went to speak directly with the association's president. Meanwhile, Hyun-seok continued facing other candidates in the arena. Even when opponents appeared armed with hammers, knives, or swords, the outcome was always the same. He defeated them all using only his bare hands, without showing any difficulty. To him, all those opponents seemed far too weak. No matter who appeared, none came close to the level he had reached after 20 years of fighting in another world. As he kept winning with ease, Hyun-seok began to wonder if there was truly no one decent there. That's when someone different finally appeared. The judge's favorite, the most famous and powerful candidate in the tournament, Han Sang-ah, emerged as the other finalist. The announcer pointed out that she might be the only one capable of defeating that mysterious newcomer. Facing his opponent, Hyun-seok realized she was different from the others. So far, the only one with a considerable amount of mana accumulated in her body. Even so, Han Sang-ah was not intimidated and claimed he was nothing special, suggesting he had only made it that far through sheer luck and wouldn't go any further. In response, Hyun-seok questioned whether that was just a rehearsed speech, typical of academy-trained heroes. Meanwhile, Han Sang-ah drew her sword and noted that he apparently had no special abilities, since he only used physical attacks. Even so, she made it clear she wouldn't hold back. Hyun-seok replied simply that he did have a unique ability, but wasn't using it because he didn't want to kill anyone. The fight began shortly after, and Han Sang-ah advanced at an impressive speed, drawing her sword like lightning. Despite the speed, the attack missed. She was surprised to realize he had dodged it, and Hyun-seok acknowledged that the attack was interesting. He observed that she used electricity to magnetize the sheath and the blade, drastically increasing the speed of her draw, an efficient technique indeed. Even so, he pointed out a critical flaw. By focusing entirely on speed, she left an opening. To him, no matter how fast the strike was, it was still a straight line movement, making it possible to evade evade. Han Sang-ah didn't like the analysis, and replied that she had already defeated many opponents like him, using that technique. Then she changed her approach, and began firing a sequence of electrical attacks. Hansek realized she was repeating patterns he could already predict, but soon understood it was only a transition. Suddenly, she completely changed her strategy and created a true storm of lightning, drastically increasing the power of her attacks. At that moment, Hyun-Sok noticed she was pushing her mana usage too far, overloading her own body. If she kept that pace, she would end up seriously injuring herself. With that in mind, he decided to end the fight quickly. He approached her and warned that if she got hurt, she should just raise her left hand. Then he delivered a direct blow to her stomach, strong enough to completely break through her defense. From that point on, the fight became entirely one-sided. Han Sang-ah's guard fell apart, and she could no longer react. Hyun-Sang unleashed a series of strikes, hitting multiple parts of her body until she fell unconscious, with no chance of continuing. The judges were left in shock, unable to understand what had just happened. The academy's top student had been utterly and overwhelmingly defeated. As he left the arena, Hyun-Suk acknowledged that she was stronger than the other candidates, but concluded that she relied too much on mana and neglected physical training. Even after being defeated, Han Sang-ah still tried to get back up. At that moment, Hyun-Sang noticed that she had raised her left hand, exactly as he had instructed. That caught his attention, and he even found the situation somewhat curious. Suddenly, an association staff member entered the arena and said something to the announcer, who immediately called for everyone's attention. The tournament plan had been changed. He asked the winner, Yu Chan-sok, to take a short break. Confused, Hein-Sok questioned whether that didn't mean he had already won. However, it was explained that there would be a special match between the tournament's winner and an active hunter, something authorized directly by the association's president. Lee Seo-nin's assistants already seemed to know what was coming. When the new opponent was announced, Hoon-seok didn't recognize her, but the crowd's reaction made it clear that she was someone extremely famous. He began to question the reason for that special match, imagining that she wanted to test his abilities, something that reminded him a lot of situations he had already experienced in the other world. To him, it was nothing new. The figure then approached the arena, carrying a massive sword. Before anything else, she apologized for not giving advance notice, explaining that she wanted to personally confirm his abilities. She introduced herself as Lee Seon from the Janub Guild, and commented that the level of the tournament seemed far too low for someone like him. Then she proposed a direct fight between the two of them, making it clear that he could refuse if he wanted. Sensing her presence, Hyun-Sok immediately realized that this woman was on a completely different level. The amount of mana she emitted was absurd, confirming that she truly was one of the strongest in the world. With the body he currently had, he knew that fight would be extremely difficult. Even if he used a weapon, his chances of victory were practically non-existent. Even so, without hesitation, he accepted the challenge. He admitted to Lee Seaman that he still had plenty of energy, and she asked if he was excited. She said that was good because she was too. While Han Sang-ah was carried away completely defeated and foaming at the mouth, he thought that he needed the best possible result in the tournament, and that Lee Si-siren was the perfect opponent for that, so he decided that this fight would serve to increase his market value. In no time, the audience was already impressed, the announcer as well, and Lee Si-ryun showed a clear intention to finish him off without mercy. Her blows were extremely heavy, and even when blocking with his spear, he was still pushed back. After a lot of effort, he managed to parry one of her attacks and create some distance. Even so, he was already very tired, and began to realize that she left no openings. His body was reaching its physical limit. Lee Se-yoon commented that she was a bit disappointed because she wanted to warm up after so long, but he was already exhausted. Even so, she acknowledged that he had done well, managing to last 5 minutes against her. Because of that, she decided to make things easier to quickly end the fight and allow him to rest. She advanced with her greatsword to take Hyun-Sok down in one blow, and at that moment he realized he had no mana left in his body, nor even in the surrounding atmosphere. Even though he didn't want to use it, he decided to activate the Flames of Paradox. At that very instant, he was struck directly by her attack. At least that's what Lee Se-yeon thought. To her, the blow had landed cleanly, but she soon realized he was still intact and had already moved away. Looking more closely, she noticed that his body seemed to be made of flames, as if the fire had completely consumed him before restoring him. That was the special ability he trusted the most, the same one he constantly used before returning to Earth. He could even keep his clothes intact, controlling the flames however he wished. This ability worked by burning abstract concepts, such as reason and memory. But at that moment, the fuel was different. It was his own fatigue. With that, he became even faster and resumed attacking, striking his spear against Lee Se-yeon's blade, which made her grow more excited about the fight. The two exchanged blows for quite some time in an intense clash. Lee Se-yeon began to find what was happening strange, noticing that the concentration of mana in the air was rising and falling in an unstable, almost chaotic way. She started to suspect that the boy was using mana itself to fuel the flames. Meanwhile, Hyun-Sok understood how the ability worked, realizing that the Flames of Paradox released mana by burning abstract concepts. He used mana as ignition, but the main fuel was his fatigue, creating a continuous cycle that generated more and more energy. During the confrontation, he realized that his specialty was a war of attrition, something he could sustain for a long time. Even while exhausted, he claimed he could keep going a bit longer, and even provoked Lee Se-yeon, asking if she liked men who didn't know when to quit. She replied that she hated that type. It was then explained that just like a burned tree turns into ashes and cannot be burned again, the flames of paradox also leave residues. Once everything is consumed, the flame simply stops. After that, Lee Se-Yuen looked at the clock and marked the total duration of the fight at 4 hours and 17 minutes. She asked if he could still continue, and Hyun-Sok replied that he couldn't, asking her to spare him. Thus, the announcer declared that, despite his effort, the winner was Lee Se-Yuen. After the fight, she pulled a lollipop from her chest, surprising even her own assistants, and said it was a reward for his performance. She also left a business card, suggesting they could talk better if he got in touch, and then left. The announcer asked the winner to head backstage to receive her reward, while Hyun-Sok began to wonder if this so-called Janabi was a hunter agency. Later, already halfway through eating the lollipop, he started exploring his phone and realized his hunter license was there. He found it extremely advanced, since he could access everything through the device, from hunter communities and equipment markets, to discounted items, emergencies, news, and messages. In the end, he concluded that this thing called a cell phone really had everything, and that was impressive. Soon after, Hyun-Sok was approached by a huge muscular man, who commented that he looked much better in person than on camera. Not fully understanding the situation, Hyun-Sok asked who he was. The man handed him a business card and introduced himself as Song Hyun from the Taebaek Guild. He spoke confidently, saying he had taken a strong interest in him and that under his leadership he would surely shine. Hyun-Sok thought it didn't sound like a bad offer, but then remembered Lee Se-Yuen and her request for him to get in touch. With that in mind, he decided he had another priority at the moment and chose not to give an immediate answer. He kept the business card and said he would think it over carefully before making a decision. Song Hyun replied that of course important decisions should be made with care, but then he stepped in close and in a somewhat intimidating tone urged the boy to think carefully about his choice. After that he left, saying he hoped to see him around. As soon as he was alone, Hyun-Sok decided he had no intention of joining Taebaek. Then he took out his phone and called Lee Se-Yuen, who answered by asking where he was. She told him to go to the second floor of the association, to a place called The Hut. The Hut was a restaurant inside the association itself, and when Hyun-Sok arrived, he was warmly greeted by a waitress and soon met Lee Se-Yuen, who was already there. She commented that he had arrived fairly early and asked him to sit down. Noticing his expression, Lee Se-Yuen asked if something had happened for him to look like that. Hyun-Sok then explained that a huge guy had tried to recruit him, someone named Song Hyun from Taebaek. Hearing that, Lee Se-Chun commented that if someone like him had shown interest, other guilds would probably not even dare to approach. Even so, Hyun-Sok wanted to confirm if that also applied to Janabi, and she replied that it didn't, making it clear she had no intention of recruiting him into the guild. Instead, Lee Se-on made a different proposal, suggesting that he work for her as a freelancer without needing to join any guild. That left Hyun-Seok confused, since he didn't even know it was possible to work as a hunter without being part of a guild. So Lee Se-Yun began to explain further. She said that normally, someone like Song Hye-yeon would offer him a junior position within the guild. Not fully understanding, Hyun-Seok asked what exactly a junior was, and how those roles worked. She explained that within a guild, ranks are divided into junior, senior, and associate. A junior works under a senior, who leads a team organized by an associate. The associate functions as someone who shares in the guild's profits, almost like a partner in a large company. Hyun-Seok commented that he had heard about that before, recalling that the first guild adopted this model, operating much like a large Korean corporation. Even so, Lee Se-chun explained that it's not mandatory to follow that traditional progression, and that someone can become an associate directly if they become powerful and famous enough. Hearing that, Hyun-Sok understood that in the end, everything revolves around drawing attention. Lee Se-yun confirmed that was exactly right, saying he had understood quickly, and even handed him a piece of candy. While opening the candy, Hyun-Sok asked if connections were the most important thing in that world. He himself admitted that he had none, besides lacking experience and never having taken part in a real mission. At that point, Lee Se-yun replied that she could help with that, making it clear that her proposal for him to work as a freelancer could be exactly the path he needed to grow in that world. Hyun-Sok didn't understand why she was doing all that for him, so she explained that she was essentially investing in him. She intended to help him a lot, and believed that when the time came for him to choose a guild, he would naturally end up choosing Janub. Then she suggested that he take a look at a document and slid an envelope across the table, making it clear that the decision was entirely his, whether to accept it or not. Inside the envelope was a mission request in the city of Incheon, near Gyongdo Island. She explained that a corrosion zone had appeared there 2 years earlier, after a failed attempt to contain a rupture. Hyun-Sok tried to confirm if the task was simply to eliminate the corrosion, but she clarified that it wasn't that simple, since they also needed to check whether the corruption had spread to other areas, and eliminate everything completely. While reviewing the details, Hyun-Sok noticed that the mission would start in a month, with an advance payment of 5 million and an additional 15 million upon success. For someone risking their life, he found the amount somewhat low, but he accepted it with a smile, thinking he could use the opportunity to become stronger and more well-known. She then pressed for an answer, wanting to know if he would accept her help or not. Later, already inside a car with her assistants, she was questioned about the boy's potential. She replied that he was a civilian who had made it to the end of a tournament, fighting barehanded, which in itself was already impressive. In practice, he had managed to endure 4 hours against her. On the other end of the call, Someone asked if she had held back her power, and she confirmed that she had. After all, she was a veteran with 10 years of experience, and under normal circumstances could have killed him if she had gone all out. Even so, she emphasized that surviving 4 hours against her was far from ordinary, and added that even if she were reborn, she doubted another monster like him would appear. Meanwhile, several participants began heading toward Gyongdo Island. Despite the mission being extremely dangerous and not paying particularly well, many people showed up because it was a great opportunity. At the same time, Lee Se-yoon spoke with her superior over the phone about the mission. He made it clear that regardless of her evaluation, what truly mattered was the boy's performance in the field. He might have talent, but it would be useless if he couldn't fight alongside veterans. Lee Se-yoon replied that if that was the concern, then there was nothing to worry about, because she had placed the boy in a group with people of a similar level. Her superior said he trusted her, reminding her that she was an important figure within Janub, and then asked how she thought he would be once he reached her level. The answer wasn't exactly what he wanted to hear, as she stated that if Yu Chan-sik reached her level, he might even be able to defeat her superior. 1 month before the mission, Hyun-sok received an impressive delivery, an extremely large spear, exactly the size he wanted. In addition, he also acquired an elixir, which he learned was a potion used by hunters in emergency situations. This elixir contained condensed mana, capable of saving lives. The explanation was that the common method of using mana worked like drinking water from a purifier. A person absorbs impure mana from the atmosphere, processes it within the body, and uses it when needed. The elixir, on the other hand, performs this process directly, filtering the mana from the atmosphere. In Hyun-sok's case, this was even more important, because he used mana in a different way, skipping the storage stage and absorbing it directly from the atmosphere. Additionally, with constant use, the mana channels gradually grow stronger, allowing one to manipulate increasingly larger amounts of energy. The problem was that at the beginning, these channels were still weak, greatly limiting mana usage, which would be a major short-term obstacle. However, with the help of the elixir and a month of intense training, he believed he could overcome that limitation. Back in the present, now on Gyongdo Island, Hyun-sik follows the line of hunters and is directed to Session 8, where he is approached by Han Sang-ah. He comments that her hair looks better that day, and she replies that her hair is usually like that, explaining that earlier it looked different because of static electricity. She also mentions that it's good they're in the same group, since they'll be able to work together during the mission. Hyun-sok asks why, and she answers directly that he is stronger than her, so she intends to learn by observing him. He changes the subject, complaining about the weight of his backpack, and she immediately starts asking whether he trains his back, if he has any spinal issues or chronic conditions, saying that this could be dangerous. Hyun-sok then realizes it's the same situation as in the arena, and thinks that she really has no sense of humor. Shortly after, an association staff member gathers Group 8 and begins explaining the mission. He notes that there are novice participants, so he decides to clarify the terminology and asks for everyone's understanding. He explains that corrosion rifts are classified as Class 1, 2, 3, and unclassified, with the danger increasing the closer they are to Class 1. In addition, the first rift to appear in a specific area receives the additional name Alpha. Currently, the location of the Alpha Rift on Gyongdo Island is in a church in the northern area. It has not yet been classified, but since this type of rift grows stronger over time, everyone is instructed not to approach it recklessly. The group's mission is very clear: patrol the perimeter and identify, as well as eliminate any other corrosion rifts that may have appeared. Some people question whether this is basically an elimination mission aimed at novices. Shortly afterward, as they approach the island, some begin to comment that they can feel a strange energy, as if their blood were turning cold. Hyun-sok thinks they are exaggerating, seeing it as pure drama. As soon as they receive authorization to disembark, they are also informed that they can contact the control room if they need help, and then they are wished good luck. As the group begins to organize, the veterans start making decisions without even considering the opinions of the novices. At that moment, Hyun-sok observes that they will probably have to explore 2 regions within a week, and suggests establishing a base at Hwagyesa Temple to operate from there. A hunter wearing glasses questions who he is, and why they should choose that particular temple. Hyun-sok explains that from Hwagyesa Temple, it is possible to get a good view of the entire region, and from the peak, it is even possible to directly observe the other area. To him, this should already be obvious. Even so, the others disagree, saying that there are several other places closer by, and raising the possibility of being surrounded after climbing the mountain. Hyun-sok counters, not understanding how that would happen there, but the veterans make it clear that they have no intention of following a novice's ideas. Given this, Hyun-sok simply thinks that there will always be people who ignore logic no matter the world, and decides not to insist. He then suggests splitting up, believing that this is the best option. Later, he heads toward Hwagyesa Temple, accompanied by only 2 people, Han Sang-ah and a man they had seen earlier on the beach. Hyun-sok is not surprised that Han Sang-ah decided to follow him, but he is curious about the other man. He notices that his mana is high, and asks if his name is Kim Min-jae, wanting to know why he is there with them. Min-jae replies that he assumed they were novices, and decided to accompany them out of concern. Hyun-sok thanks him, recognizing that he at least found someone sensible there. However, in the middle of the path he suddenly stops and tells everyone to stay quiet, and observe carefully. Looking more closely, they notice several creatures climbing the mountain, with pointed ears and sharp teeth. Min-jae suggests that they retreat immediately, since there are at least 50 creatures. Hyun-sok ignores the idea idea of retreat and asks what his unique ability is. Surprised, Min-jae asks if he is really thinking about fighting, but Hyun-sok replies that this is exactly their job and insists on knowing his ability. He then reveals that he uses fire. With that, Hyun-sok quickly lays out a plan and tells him to attack on his signal. Han Sang-asks what her role will be, while Min-jae still tries to argue that it is madness, emphasizing that there are too many enemies and that they could call for reinforcements over the radio. Hyun-sok explains that there would be no time since the other groups are far away after following the coast, while they advance directly toward a strategic point. He also points out that relying on the radio is risky, as there is no guarantee anyone would arrive in time, and that if they let those creatures spread out, the problem could become much bigger. Min-jae realizes that the reasoning makes sense, especially considering that other hunters might not even want to help because of the earlier conflict. Given the situation, Hyun-sok concludes that the only option is to deal with it right there. Even at a slight disadvantage, he states that a surprise attack could turn the tide. Using his spear, he draws the creature's positions on the ground and defines the strategy. Min-jae would attack first, aiming at the center with a fireball, while he himself would flank to prevent any escape. Han Sang-ah should use her speed to finish off any remaining enemies. As he listens, Min-jae realizes that Hyun-sok has put together an extremely detailed plan, like someone who has faced that type of creature many times before. When they finally move into action, positioned on the mountainside, Min-jae fires his fireball, which hits the enemy group directly and incinerates several creatures at once in the very first attack. He then warns that he'll need some time before he can cast another. Hyun-sok tells Min-jae to launch the next fireball as soon as it's ready and at the same time charges forward. He always prioritizes efficiency in combat, advancing with his spear and cutting down everything in his path, striking necks, limbs, and vital points, without wasting movement. In his mind, everyone needs to fulfill their role properly for the best possible outcome. Until the next spell is ready, Hyun-seok focuses on preventing the creatures from escaping the mountain. He knows he can't block all of them alone, which is exactly why he assigned roles beforehand. While he holds back most of the enemies, Sang-ah deals with those who manage to get past, using her speed to finish them off. Soon after, Min-jae announces that he's ready to cast another fireball. Hyun-sok responds that he'll move out of the way and gives him space to attack. As soon as the spell is released and hits the mountainside, the explosion finishes off the remaining creatures. In just a few minutes, all the enemies are dead. Just when everything seems resolved, the situation changes quickly. Min-jae raises a weapon and points it toward Hyun-sok, making him flinch, thinking he's about to be shot. But in reality, Min-jae simply asks him to step aside for a moment and fires at the body of one of the creatures on the ground. It's a microchip gun. He explains that it's used to ensure the collection of materials after the mission. Since carrying the bodies is difficult, they're heavy and bulky. They use these chips to mark the targets. Later, scavengers come in, collect everything of value, appraise it, sell it, and split the profit. The hunters receive their agreed commission, and the rest is returned. Hyun-sok questions whether that kind of service is truly reliable, and Min-jae replies that's why it's important to have a trustworthy reseller and a formal contract. Shortly after, he praises Hyun-sok's performance, saying he didn't expect them to defeat 50 creatures like that. However, he celebrates too soon. Suddenly, a much larger creature appears and slams the ground near them, nearly hitting all three. Hyun-sok reacts quickly and manages to save Min-jae at the last second. The monster resembles the others but is far stronger, with a muscular body and a bat-like appearance without wings. At a glance, it's clear that it's the leader of the group and that its level is far superior. Hyun-sok quickly assesses the situation and decides to take on the fight alone. He tells the other two not to interfere, making it clear that if it turns into a chase, they wouldn't stand a chance of escaping. Min-jae questions whether that's really necessary, and Sang-ah also shows concern, but Hyun-sok cuts off any argument and orders them to stay out of it, making it clear he doesn't want to see anyone going back in a coffin. In his mind, fighting alone is actually better, because it allows him to use his paradox flames without worrying about hitting allies. He wants to end it as quickly as possible. Even so, Min-jae begins preparing another spell, still unsure, and asks Sang-ah if they shouldn't help. She watches the fight and replies that it doesn't seem necessary. In fact, Hyun-sok completely dominates the battle. With fast and precise movements, he advances with a series of spear strikes, tearing into the creature's flesh while dodging all of its counterattacks. Each successful hit is accompanied by black flames at the tip of his weapon, which begin to accumulate on the monster's body. As the fire spreads, the creature grows slower, as if it's being gradually weakened. Sang-ah watches in awe, realizing that he not only attacks with intensity, but also moves with perfect precision, leaving no openings. This definitely doesn't look like the level of a novice. During the fight, Hyun-sok practically toys with the enemy, controlling the pace of the battle. At an unexpected moment, he throws his own spear into the air, shocking the other two. It seems like a bad idea, but he already has everything calculated. When the creature lunges forward to bite him, the spear comes crashing down with full force, smashing its skull against the ground. Even so, the monster still moves, resisting thanks to its absurd strength, though it is already being consumed by the paradox flames. Hyun-sok notices this, and decides to finish the fight once and for all. He kills the creature without hesitation. When it's all over, a heavy silence settles in. Min-jae and Sang-ah are clearly shaken by what they just witnessed. Min-jae, still trying to process everything, questions how that was even possible. At the start of the fight, it even seemed like the monster had some advantage, but in the end, it became clear that Hyunsuk had been in control the entire time. Before they even realized it, the creature was already on the ground. Calmly, Hyunsuk retrieves his spear and asks Min-jae if it's normal for a monster of that level to appear on the island. He replies that he was thinking the same thing, because the presence of something like that could indicate a Class 3 corrosion zone. This leaves Hyunsuk confused, since up until then, the area hadn't been classified. In that case, Min-jae explains that it likely evolved into Class 3 without prior notice. Sang-ho recalls the mission briefing, trying to make sense of the situation, but Min-jae reinforces that if it isn't Class 3, there's no other explanation for what they just faced. He adds that the difference between an unclassified zone and a Class 3 zone is enormous, like night and day, and that if this is true, the hunters' chances of survival on the island are almost non-existent. Given that, he suggests they need to leave immediately to save the others. Hyunsuk, however, refuses on the spot. He makes it clear that there's no way to save everyone, and that he also has his limits. He also emphasizes that the mission isn't about rescuing hunters, since everyone went there fully aware of the risks. The objective is to identify and eliminate the threats within the corrosion zone. Sang-ha questions him, asking how he would react if he were in the same situation, whether he wouldn't find it unfair and wouldn't beg for help. Hyunsuk responds directly, saying that he understands human emotions, but that he's talking about results and consequences. To him, some deaths are inevitable, regardless of what anyone feels or thinks, and acting with that kind of emotional mindset can be fatal in this world. Later, at the end of the day, the group arrives at Hwagyesa Temple. Hyunsuk carefully analyzes the place and concludes that there are no signs of corrosion inside the building. He asks if Min-jae noticed anything, and he replies that he saw nothing but darkness, though he points out some lights in the distance, probably campfires from other hunters. This worries Hyunsuk, who considers using light to be dangerous since it reveals one's position. Against weak enemies it wouldn't be a problem, but against stronger creatures like the one they fought, it could be fatal. Even so, he sends a message to Group 8, warning that the corrosion zone is likely Class 3 and recommending that they avoid unnecessary risks. Later, while they talk, Hyunsuk asks for an explanation of how to close a corrosion zone. Min-jae, drawing on the ground, explains that everything revolves around the core. If it is destroyed, the corrosive radiation disappears completely. Hearing this, Hyunsuk concludes that in the end, the solution is simple: just destroy the core. During the night, while Sang-ha and Min-jae sleep, Hyunsuk sets an alarm near them, ensuring they'll be alerted if anything approaches. With that in place, he decides to act alone and quickly descends the mountain. From above, he had already identified the source of the corrosion and believes he can reach the core in a short time. On the way, however, he hears the roar of a creature. Using his flames to illuminate the surroundings, he faces the enemy and immediately realizes it's not like the others. This creature is even larger and far more menacing. Meanwhile, in the control room on Gyongdo Island, the situation is chaotic. Multiple reports come in at once, indicating hunter casualties across the island. Team 5 has been practically wiped out, and Team 3 has also suffered losses. The manager recognizes the severity of the situation and declares a state of emergency, ordering everyone to be notified. Amid the chaos, one of the operators notices something unusual. Someone is heading directly toward the core of the corrosion zone. The manager orders them to make contact immediately and tell the person to retreat. However, upon confirming the identity, they discover it's a hunter from Team 8, Yu Chan-sok, who was the first to locate the true rift. Without wasting time, the manager orders them to connect to his terminal to check if he's still alive. The manager thinks that a reclassification of a rift is something almost unprecedented in that region, or even nearby, and begins to wonder if that boy was the one who detected it first. In his view, if anyone has answers, it's Yu Chan-sok. As soon as they establish a connection, the situation already appears chaotic. Yu Chan-sok is running while cursing, complaining that everything is much faster than he expected. He's being chased by a massive creature, clearly trying to devour him. Even so, he comments that he's only managing to escape because it's him, making it clear that anyone else would already be dead in that situation. While running, he also criticizes the association, questioning how that was classified as unclassified. In the control room, someone suggests muting the microphone because of the complaints, but the manager ignores it and focuses on what matters. They've confirmed that Yu Chan-seok is still alive. During the chase, Yu Chan-seok analyzes the situation. He realizes he can't defeat that creature in one go with his flames. His plan has to change. First weaken the monster using fire, then finish it with his spear. The problem is that the creature stays right on his heels, giving him no opening. On top of that, he has already consumed a large amount of mana from the area earlier, which makes it harder to create an efficient flow to use his flames again. Since he can't leave the island to draw mana from another territory, he understands that he'll have to make do with what he has. Even so, he keeps moving forward and eventually finds the rift's core. As he approaches the corrosion portal, he even taunts the creature, telling it to keep up because he just needs to check one thing inside before finishing the fight. Back in the control room, the tension rises when they realize that Yu Chan-seok's GPS signal has completely disappeared. This indicates that he has entered entered the inner zone of the rift, making any attempt at monitoring much more difficult. Upon crossing the portal, Yu Chen-sok is surprised. Instead of a chaotic environment, he finds a clean landscape, a green and seemingly peaceful plain. It doesn't match what he expected from a corrosion zone. He observes the area carefully and concludes that for something classified as level 3, the space doesn't even seem that large. This makes him question the scale of things even more, wondering what class 1 and 2 zones would be like, and whether they would really be as simple as this appears at first glance. When the creature rises, Hyun-sok understands that the tour to the core of the corrosion rift is over, and now it's time to finish things once and for all, making it clear that there's no turning back from this fight. The creature responds with a violent roar, charging at him ready to kill, while he calmly analyzes the situation. He knows that one of the major flaws of the Paradox Flames is that they spread to all living beings, without distinguishing between enemies and allies. Because of that, he decides to act with precision. Hyun-sok envelops his spear in black flames and thinks that all he needs is a controlled arena to win. Then, with a single strike, he unleashes a massive explosion of fire that hits the creature directly, charring its beastly body. But to him, that still isn't the end. It's only the beginning of the most important part. He takes a deep breath and focuses on his own mana, feeling everything he has absorbed so far circulating through his body. His mana pathways are stronger and more refined, and he realizes he is far more efficient than he imagined, with much greater control over his power. As the creature screams in pain, it uses what little strength it has left to call for reinforcements. Within seconds, several bat-like creatures appear around him, trying to surround him. Even so, Hyun-sok remains unfazed, as he has already understood that numbers make no difference at this level of combat. Over time, he generates a cyclone of fire around himself, and the storm of flames simply annihilates all the creatures that approach. Something lunged at him at high speed and struck directly. Hyun-sok reacted in time and blocked it with his spear. When he looked more closely, he realized it wasn't an ordinary enemy. It was a creature resembling a bat, but with a humanoid form, and more importantly, capable of speaking and thinking strategically. He noticed that the attack only came when his flames had gone out, which showed that the enemy was intelligent enough to wait for the right moment. The level of corrosion of that creature was clearly far superior, and it responded aggressively, making it clear that he would die there. Even so, Hyun-sok remained calm and assessed that, with that level of mana, he might be able to use his special technique. He advanced with his spear, and the first strike was so powerful that it nearly split the enemy's weapon in half. Then he activated the spear's 2-orbit ability. The second attack came as an echo of the first, piercing not only the weapon, but also the enemy's body. This ability created a blue trajectory that followed exactly the path of the initial strike, repeating the attack multiple times. It was a simple technique in execution, but extremely destructive, as it multiplied the impact of the first movement, and even if the enemy managed to dodge the initial strike, they would still have to deal with the echo that followed immediately after. That was exactly what happened. The humanoid managed to avoid the initial attack, but the echo of the thrust exploded directly into its face. At that moment, the fight was already decided. Several beams of light pierced the creature's body, which was ultimately disintegrated and returned to mana form. Soon after, it condensed into a reward box. Hyun-sok opened it and was impressed by what he found, while at the same time, the situation outside was becoming critical. In the control room, everyone was in complete despair. The scattered groups were facing gigantic and extremely powerful monsters, and no one could understand what was happening. The manager came to the conclusion that they needed a miracle to get out of that situation. That was when one of the staff announced that a message had arrived from Yu Chen-sok, who had entered the rift. Without wasting time, the message was displayed on the big screen. In it, he stated directly that he had taken care of the Alpha Corrosion Core. That changed everything. The manager immediately recognized that this was, in fact, the miracle they needed. Meanwhile, far from there, Hyun-sok silently watched the night sky, taking a deep breath and enjoying the fresh air after the battle. At another point in the rift, Sang-ah continued fighting, using thunder strikes to eliminate the creatures around her. Even being extremely powerful, she was already reaching her limit. Her hands trembled from the constant electrical discharges, and she began to realize that the number of enemies was simply too great. On top of that, Yu Chen-sok had disappeared, which only increased the tension. Beside her, Min also showed clear signs of exhaustion and questioned whether they would be able to get out of there alive. Sang-ah realized that he was at his limit, just like her, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep fighting. When another creature advanced, she tried to prepare to react, but her body didn't respond as it should. Her legs gave out, and she completely lost her balance. Before either of them could do anything, all the creatures simply disappeared. The next day, already on Gyongdo Island at the meeting point, Hyun-sok noticed that there were many injured. He concluded that the creatures had likely gone into a frenzy after he left the core area. As he observed the situation, members of Team 8 began talking among themselves, asking if that had been Yu Jan-sok's doing, claiming that he had defeated the rift alone. But Hyun-sok simply ignored everyone around him and went straight to look for Min-jae and Sang-ah. When Min-jae received his message, he was completely shocked upon realizing what had happened, because it was hard to believe that someone had defeated an entire rift alone. In his reply, Hyun-sok explained that in the end it wasn't his body that moved to protect the other hunters, but his heart. He also reflected that maintaining a good image was an important skill in that world. Then he commented that if he had known from the the beginning where that rift was, he would have finished everything even before the previous day's sunset. Shortly after, a man approached and introduced himself as Jung Tai, saying he was part of the Operating Corporation of Korea, more specifically from the 3rd Northern Branch of Jungcheon. He asked if Hyun Sok had a moment to talk, as the mayor wanted to speak with him personally. Upon arriving at the enormous estate, Hyun Sok found the situation a bit strange, and thought that older people really liked making others come to them. Even so, he considered that he might receive some kind of reward for what he had done, so he decided to take the opportunity to try negotiating some sort of compensation. At that moment, Lee Piljae introduced himself and said he would guide him through the place. Along the way, they explained that the mayor was extremely eager for that meeting, especially because when they received the Gyeongincheon report that morning, everyone had been completely surprised. The reaction was so strong that the mayor even cancelled his entire schedule just to meet him. Even so, Hyun Sok responded calmly, saying that it wasn't anything that impressive and that there was no need for so much fuss. However, Lee Piljae immediately disagreed, making it clear that it was something huge, since he had destroyed a Class 3 rift alone, something that hadn't happened since the time of the Great Pioneer. Hearing that, Hyun Sok thought that someone capable of doing such a thing had already existed before him, and concluded that this person must have been the real monster, not him. Shortly after, they arrived at the mayor of Incheon's office. The mayor apologized for calling him at such a complicated time, invited Hyun Sok to sit down, and asked for coffee to be brought. Then he praised Yuchon Sok's work, highlighting that he had done something important for the country. The mayor explained that, as the one responsible for Incheon, Gyongdo Island had always been a difficult problem to solve. They knew they needed to deal with it, but the budget was limited, which made it hard to hire a guild strong enough. Hearing that, Hyun Sok responded bluntly, suggesting that he should be satisfied that everything had been resolved, especially at such a low cost. The mayor agreed, but soon shifted the tone of the conversation, noting that this had been Yu Chen Sok's first mission, and that it was impressive to think someone so talented had started right there in Incheon. He said that as mayor, he felt extremely proud and honored by that. The statement was so exaggerated that it caught Hyun Sok off guard, even making him choke on his coffee. Even so, the mayor continued, praising Korea as the safest country in the world, and highlighting Incheon as one of its most important regions, thanks to its infrastructure, especially the airport, which allowed large-scale movement of goods in and out. While listening, Hyun Sok found himself recalling the man who had brought him there. At another time, Jong Tae had asked Yu Chain Sok why he decided to become a hunter. The answer came directly and without hesitation. If something is spreading chaos and problems everywhere, someone has to step in and deal with it. Young Tae then remarked that with that kind of attitude and power, he would probably become famous. Skilled hunters were extremely popular. They received offers for commercials and even appearances on TV shows. At that, Hyun Sok admitted he was concerned about the possibility of changing because of fame. In response, Hyun So was honest and said that it did happen frequently, as many promising hunters ended up being carried away by popularity and recognition, losing sight of their true duty. He explained that in a way this was natural, because on the other side there was the dangerous corrosion zone, full of threatening monsters. While Korea was considered the only truly safe place, it was no coincidence that the country was known as the last sanctuary on Earth. Hyun Sok commented that even that seemed to be influenced by the power of capital, making it clear he already understood the game behind everything. Hyun To replied that what Hyun Sok had done was incredible, and that many people in difficult situations would start to look at him as a symbol of hope. He only hoped he would continue to be that figure. After hearing that, Yu Chan Sok grew curious about how far this would go, since they weren't even trying to hide their intentions. Even so, for their misfortune, he wasn't the type to be swayed by that kind of influence. He had already lived too much and gone through all kinds of situations to be easily manipulated, so he responded directly that if they were going to offer that much support, then he deserved a reward to match. He even took a jab, saying he could help a mayor with falling approval ratings get re-elected. The mayor didn't deny it, he simply commented that Hyun Sok was well informed. Hyun Sok replied casually that nowadays anything could be found on a phone, and that he already knew the mayor's term was ending and the forecasts weren't favorable. The mayor admitted he was being very straightforward, and then explained the real reason for the conversation. He said that for Yu Chen Sok to officially participate in that commission, he would need approval from the Incheon City Hall. Hearing that, Yu Chan Sok realized that, contrary to what it seemed, this wasn't optional for a newcomer. He truly needed that authorization. If he agreed to play their game, he could be presented as a talent discovered by Incheon. Otherwise, the mayor could still use his name to promote himself anyway. In the end, it became clear that this was all an attempt to take advantage of him. The mayor then tried to reinforce the proposal, saying that thanks to his connections with various companies, he could open many opportunities. As an example, he even mentioned an instant coffee brand whose model's contract was about to end, suggesting that Yu Chan Sok could take that spot as the new face of the campaign. At that moment, Yu Chan Sok lost his patience and slammed his mug on the table, making it clear that the mayor was treating him as someone easy to buy. He remarked that, judging by recent news, it seemed the world really did need someone to change that heavy atmosphere. But that didn't mean he would sell himself for that kind of offer. He added that if he kept working as a hunter, everything the mayor was offering would be something he could achieve on his own anyway. The mayor insisted, saying he could guarantee safe and well-paid missions, specially selected for him. Even so, Yu Chan-sok rejected everything, saying the proposal was completely uninteresting, and with a touch of irony, he told him to congratulate the coffee model on having her contract renewed. Later in a tunnel, a hooded man commented that the test on Gyongdo Island had been a failure. The subordinate replied that, despite that, they had something useful, a recording of the hunter responsible for defeating the rift. The hooded man then showed interest, mentioning the name Yu Chan-sok, and recognizing that he was a promising young man. Shortly after, the first day of the month arrived, the moment when the entire nation kept an eye on the ranking updates. Normally there were barely any changes, so it was more like entertainment for the public. But this time was different. The president of the Hunters Association received the updated global ranking, and several important figures were watching closely, such as Lee Se-nguyen and Hyun Sok. Then came the surprise. Yu Chan-sok entered directly into the global top 10. The ranking still featured major names, such as Lee Se-yoon, known for his absurd efficiency despite his age, along with Kim Chae-hyun in 5th place, Choi Yeoryum in 3rd, and Jang Tae-seok in 2nd. At the top, the number 1 remained unchanged, while Yu Chen-seok appeared as the big new entry. He was congratulated for entering the world ranking in record time. After all, a veteran hunter defeating a grade 3 rift alone wouldn't attract that much attention, but a newly graduated rookie doing it solo was completely out of the ordinary. During the press conference, which was packed, reporters began asking multiple questions, wanting to know what he had done before becoming a hunter, and whether he had truly received no help. In the middle of it all, Yu Chan-sok felt like a child being pressured in a quiz show. Even so, he maintained his composure and said he had a schedule to keep, so he would answer only one more question. Someone then asked him to share his mindset as a hunter, or leave a message about his goals. He refused to give a cliché answer, saying he wouldn't claim he would do his best. Instead, he simply stated that he would deliver results, period. Later, aboard a helicopter, Yu Chan-sok looked down at what used to be Gonsol Prison, now reduced to a massive crater. An older man explained that the sight was horrifying, but common, not just there, but in many places around the world. He went on to say that after the emergence of the corrosion rifts, many countries completely lost their ability to maintain order. Hearing that, Yu Chan-sok asked whether the countries that failed to deal with the rifts had ended up like that. The answer was straightforward: yes. Many capitals had simply vanished after the appearance of the rifts. As they talked, the helicopter moved closer to the devastated area, giving them a clearer view of the scale of destruction. The older man then began explaining the so-called Great Eight, the 8 most dangerous rifts in the world, and one of them was located precisely where Gonsol Prison once stood. He explained that the Gonsol Prison rift had appeared suddenly 13 years ago, expanding outward from the center of the city in a massive circle, without any warning. A few people managed to survive at first, but as the area quickly turned into a corrosion zone, nearly all of them were eventually consumed with no chance of escape. Within days, the entire city had simply vanished from the map. Despite the emergence of these rifts, he noted that global influence between nations hadn't changed that much, but internally, central governments had become much weaker. Hearing that, Yu Chan-sok found the information useful, but still didn't see how it related to why he had been brought there. That was when the man revealed that a few days earlier, Yoon Sung-hyun from the Tabaek Guild had gone looking for him and expressed dissatisfaction that Yu Chan-sok had not joined the guild. At that moment, Yu Chan-sok recalled the large man who had previously tried to intimidate him. The association president explained that the man had even asked about Yu Chan-sek's whereabouts, but since it was personal information, nothing had been disclosed. Still, he gave a clear warning. Tabaek's ideology revolved around the survival of the fittest, so it wouldn't be surprising if they tried to force him to join through violence. Thinking about it, Yu Chan-sok realized that this could indeed become a serious problem, since facing someone of that level through brute force wouldn't be easy. The president then analyzed his behavior and commented that, from what it seemed, he preferred to act alone rather than join a guild. Because of that, he suggested a solution. If he wanted to avoid that kind of approach, the best path would be to increase his position and influence, for example by accepting direct backing from the association president. As he said that, he handed over a brown envelope. Yu Chan-sok immediately understood that it wouldn't come for free and asked what he wanted in return. The president replied simply that he only needed it to be recorded that he had helped Yu Chan-sok on his journey. Nothing more. After thinking it over, Yu Chan-sok concluded that it wasn't a bad deal. Not only was it easy to accept, but it would also help build his reputation. Even so, he wanted to know what the job would be. The president explained that the mission would be to escort a cargo ship from Busan to the city of Nanning. Due to the corrosion zones, transporting items considered essential had become difficult. When he looked at the cargo list, Yu Chan-sok was completely puzzled. Among the items were luxury watches, fine porcelain, expensive drinks, and even a high-end car. It didn't look like basic necessities at all, and he came to the conclusion that the concept of daily needs had changed a lot over the past 20 years. The president replied that for certain people, those items were indeed essential. Even so, Yu Chan-sok didn't understand, and questioned why anyone would need such things in a country where the central government was practically collapsing. The president then explained that, although many countries were in decline because of the rifts, international politics still carried weight, and maintaining relations with other nations, especially China, was necessary. necessary. Even understanding the context, Yu Chan-sok was direct and refused the mission. He made it clear that he had no interest in getting involved in something of that level, and even began preparing to leave. The president tried to argue that it was important for the Korean government, but he didn't change his mind. To Yu Chan-sok, it would be a mistake to get dragged into the center of political matters, as just an individual. The president then remarked that perhaps the excessive attention was getting to his head, since he was still a rookie hunter. Unbothered, Yu Chan-sok simply tossed the documents out of the helicopter, thanked him for the ride, and said he would continue on his own. Right after that, he jumped out of the helicopter without hesitation. The president only watched and commented that young people these days were complicated. Much later, Yu Chan-sok appeared at the port of Incheon, completely exhausted after swimming for a long time. He even remarked that he thought he was going to die along the way. A dock worker who was on break looked at him and said he didn't know what had happened, but it was clear he had been through a lot. Yao Chan-sok thanked him simply. As he caught his breath, he reflected that his greatest need at that moment was to become stronger. He decided that he would prioritize the most difficult and dangerous missions, the ones no one wanted to take, in order to become someone who couldn't be easily threatened or controlled. With that in mind, he chose a mission that seemed appropriate, involving a rift estimated to be Class 2. That would be enough to keep him busy for a while. September 3rd, giant shrimp season. Several fishermen set out to sea, but the ocean felt different, strange, as if something was wrong. Creatures appeared near Tsushima Island and began abducting the fishermen, acting as if they were intelligent enough to plan it. According to a survivor who managed to escape, the fishermen were still alive, taken as hostages to Tsushima Island. Chan-sek's job would be to rescue the hostages and get rid of the rift. The reward was 55 million, and if he handled everything alone, it would be a great amount of money. On top of that, clearing another rift solo would further boost his reputation. It was a challenge worth taking, but it wasn't simple. Rank 3 creatures had the power of a war tank, while Rank 2 ones could be compared to natural disasters. A Rank 1 rift, on the other hand, required national-level mobilization. Because of that, he knew he couldn't underestimate a Rank 2 rift, and started thinking he needed someone strong by his side. That was when he remembered someone. Later, already on the boat heading toward Tsushima Island, he was accompanied by Sang-ah, who observed everything around them while asking how long it would take to arrive. Chan-sok replied that maybe an hour. As they waited, she kept looking at his armor, finding it strange that he wore protection on only one shoulder, and asked if it was just for aesthetics and where he got it. He answered somewhat bluntly, asking if she had always been so talkative, and explained that he got it from a scrapper. Sang-ah commented that hers hadn't given her anything, and Chan-sok shot back saying that was normal since she was still a rookie, while he was already a rising prospect for having dealt with a Rank 3 rift on his own. He made it clear that if she felt offended, then she should train more to become stronger. A few days earlier, Sang-ah had received a call from Chan-sok, inviting her to be his partner on this mission. It was a Rank 2 rift, and she was scared, since she had nearly died in a Rank 3 one. Even so, he reminded her that she herself had said she wanted to get stronger. He stated that he could teach her, and that she could become much more powerful. That was what made Sang-ah accept, because she truly wanted to grow, and decided to throw herself into it. During the trip, the boat emitted an alert. Enemies were detected in the distance. On the horizon, several ghostly ships began approaching. There were 5 in total, something far too strange to ignore. Chan-sok found it suspicious, wondering how those ships had gotten there like that. He then asked if Sang-ah had any way to get them there quickly. She simply began to float, showing that she could move through the air. He was surprised, asking if she really had that kind of ability, and she replied as if it were something simple, saying that many people could do that. Shortly after, she was carrying Chan-sok toward one of the ships, even with a bump on her head from a punch she had taken. He complained for her to be careful, because water was splashing on him, since he couldn't float or run on water, so he depended on her to get there. As they got closer, Chan-sok noticed something strange. He felt a presence, a relatively strong mana energy. Looking more carefully, he could make out the silhouette of something that seemed human, but from the way it moved, it was clear it wasn't. Without hesitation, he leapt onto the ship, which was packed with zombies. When the horde advanced on him, Chan-sok responded with rapid spear strikes, creating a true barrage that tore apart the fragile bodies of the enemies. Even though it was a Rank 2 rift, he realized those zombies weren't that strong, which meant Sang-ah would be able to deal with them as well. Suddenly, a lightning bolt split the ship in half, forcing Chan-sok to dodge quickly. He realized Sang-ah was spending too much mana, and warned that at that rate she wouldn't last long against enemies of that level. He explained that she didn't need to use all that power at once. Remembering his words about learning and becoming stronger, Sang-ah began adjusting her attacks, trying to use less energy. Chan-sok kept guiding her, insisting she reduce her power consumption more and more. As she fought, she thought that the life of someone weak was like a cold, endless darkness, something she never wanted to experience again. She needed to become strong. With that in mind, she launched another attack and split another zombie in half with her lightning. Determined, Sang-ah decided she would do whatever it took to evolve, even if it meant throwing herself headfirst into that hell. After killing the last skeleton or zombie on that ship, Sang-ah was approached by Yu Chan-seok, who had already destroyed all the other ships by himself. She said it went well, but it could have been better, and thanked him for his help. She mentioned that she was learning a lot, and he replied not to even mention it, saying that there are idiots in the world who wouldn't learn even if he drew it out for them. Sang-ah explained that in fact, it was the first time someone had given her real advice. Yu Chan-seok found that strange and asked what she meant, since the academy should be a place to learn. She replied that she had always learned everything very quickly, so people would just say she was annoying. He then teased her, asking if by continuing to give her advice, she would become stronger than him. Sang-ah replied that she had already surpassed all her teachers, and he, with a sideways and arrogant glance, made it clear that this wouldn't happen with him. That answer clearly irritated her. When they finally arrived on the island, they were greeted by some staff members who wished them good luck. Yu Chan-sok commented that, according to the survivors, the hostages were in some kind of temple. Sang-ah explained that there were 2 temples on the island, Gaijin and Atazumi, and Yu Chan-sok added that, judging by the distance, Gaijin would be the first one, and they would reach it in a few hours. Even so, Yu Chan-sok thought that the problem wasn't getting there, but coming back. According to the report, there were 15 hostages, and it would be much harder to return with all of them, especially if they were injured. On top of that, he could feel a very aggressive mana in the environment, something that made even his skin slightly numb. To him, it was obvious that on the way back they would be chased by countless corrosion creatures, so they would need a vehicle to ensure a safe retreat. When they found a vehicle, Yu Chan-sok asked if Sang-ah was a good driver, and she said yes, but later, she was already speeding at full throttle, while being chased by a horde of zombies. Yu Chan-sok started questioning that good driving, complaining that it seemed like the brake was just for decoration. Sang-ah shot back saying that if he didn't like it he could drive, but he told her to forget it. Instead, he climbed onto the roof of the van, saying that even like that she was probably still better than him, since his driver's license had been forgotten for over 20 years, and he was far more useful fighting. Up there, he tied his spear to a rope attached to his waist, and began attacking the creatures, throwing it and pulling it back. He even commented that it would be bad if the rope snapped, but soon he noticed more zombies coming from the bushes on the left, and throwing themselves at the car. When Sang-ah realized the situation, she reacted quickly, pulling off a sharp spin, and knocking everything around them away, even joking about it. That made Yu Chan-sok seriously consider stopping everything and taking the wheel, since he didn't feel safe at all letting her drive. At the end of the road they reached the temple, and drove up the stairs with the car itself, smashing everything along the way. As soon as they passed the first arch, Yu Chan-sok got down and planted his spear into the ground, activating the flames of paradox. He let the fire spread across the stairs through movement and friction, creating a barrier that burned the creatures chasing them. Inside the temple, they finally found the hostages, all tied to a wooden post. Sang-ah introduced herself as a hunter from the association, but one of the hostages began to panic, trying to warn them about something. She tried to calm him down, saying she was there to save them, but he insisted that they should run immediately, or she would die as well. It was then that Sang-ah realized too late the presence of an enemy behind her, and Yu Chan-sok had to intervene quickly, blocking the attack of a samurai. He told her to put all the survivors in the car, because he would handle that opponent alone. The fight was complicated, since the samurai was extremely fast and powerful. Yu Chan-sok was at a disadvantage, fighting with a spear against a katana in close combat, and needed to create distance. That's when Sang-ah helped in her own way, running the samurai over with the van, and throwing him against the temple wall. Even so, Yu Chan-sok made it clear that when they got back to the mainland, she should promise never to touch a steering wheel again. She completely ignored him, and told him to just get in the car already. With all the hostages inside the van, she accelerated again, beginning their escape. As expected, the way back was even worse, with the zombies more aggressive than before. Yu Chan-sok noticed something strange, and commented that they seemed to remain alive even after being run over. Because of that, he asked to borrow Sang-ah's sword, but she replied that asking for a swordsman's sword was extremely offensive. Even so, he shot back that at that moment it was a choice between her honor or people's survival, leaving the decision in her hands. Sang-ah simply threw the sword to him, and he held both weapons at the same time, already commenting that he didn't expect to need to use that so soon. 3 days earlier, when he opened the small box he had received as a reward inside the rank 3 rift, he had obtained a special glove capable of absorbing even more mana from the atmosphere. Judging by the level of the rift, he knew it was just basic equipment, something anyone could get, but to him it was much more than a simple mana supplement, because considering the size of his own reserves, that glove worked like a battery, guaranteeing about 5 minutes of pure destruction. By activating the glove's power and intensely absorbing mana from the atmosphere, he delivered so many slashes that it became impossible to even see the surroundings properly, simply shredding everything around him, including enemies and even trees. After that, he told Sang-ah to head back to the port, and the two followed the road, already close to the sea. With only a few zombies still chasing them, the van was completely wrecked, and Sang-ah began to question where they kept coming from, since the vehicle also had its limits, suggesting that maybe it would be better to stop and deal with them. But Yu Chan-sok simply told her to keep driving. Shortly after, they passed through a kind of barrier that prevented the zombies from advancing, and Sang-ah found it strange that they had suddenly stopped, wondering if it had something to do with the symbol in that place. Yu Chan-sok himself had created it, a geometric protection formation that in simple terms served to repel monsters. He explained this, and she asked where he had learned something like that, but he replied that even if he explained everything in detail, she wouldn't be able to learn it, while thinking to himself that it came from another world. When he got out of the van, he commented that she was getting better and better, and Sang-ah asked if that formation could repel any kind of monster. He explained that it couldn't, that it only worked on weaker ones, since truly powerful monsters would be able to break through, and that was exactly what happened, as a samurai completely wrecked by the van crossed the barrier, still fulfilling his duty to protect the sacrifice. Sang-ah immediately felt his presence. Noticing his gaze fixed on her, she recognized it as the eye of the mind, explaining that it was a kind of sixth sense capable of predicting an opponent's attacks, something even master swordsmen struggled to achieve, and began to question how a mere zombie could possess such an ability. Even trembling, she felt Yu Chan-sok touch her shoulder and tell her not to worry, stating that techniques like that were nothing more than tricks, and asking her to watch closely because he would show her how to deal with any kind of technique. The samurai adjusted his skeletal joints and took an attack stance, ready to kill, while Sang-ah questioned where Yu Chan-sok was going alone. He then explained that the eye of the mind was nothing more than an accumulation of information gained after countless battle experiences, functioning like a natural reflex, something that reacts unconsciously to fear, danger, and attacks. He made it clear that merely projecting killing intent was not the same thing, and was even somewhat pitiful. He continued, explaining that concepts such as eye of the mind, heart and sword, a state of self-awareness, the union between man and weapon, and the return of all flows to their origin, are called realms. Then, with a simple movement of his spear, he destroyed the enemy. Even so, he stated that these so-called realms were nothing special, and as he watched the fragments of the enemy scatter through the air, he reflected that what people call enlightenment can be something frightening, since they cling to names and concepts, and end up setting limits on themselves. To him, what truly matters on the battlefield has no name, and he could say that with conviction, because he had to make many sacrifices to escape that trap. Yu Chan-sok noted that the enemy had managed to survive the impact of Sang-ah's van, but still relied on the eye of the mind as its trump card. Meanwhile, Sang-ah began to reflect on what she had actually accomplished in that mission, realizing that despite considering herself talented, it was Yu Chan-sok who had solved everything. The difference in power between them was enormous, and thinking about her own goal, she decided to ask Yu Chan-sok for a favor, requesting that he truly teach her. He responded simply, asking if he wasn't already doing that, but she explained that advice and demonstrations weren't enough, making it clear that she wanted him to become her master and guide her along that path. She admitted that compared to him she was ridiculously weak, and that was precisely why she wanted to learn as quickly as possible. When he asked her reason, she revealed that she wanted to destroy the Shaddai Club with her own hands. In that world, the 8 most dangerous corrosion rifts were known as the 8 Greats. Among them, the Shaddai Club was famous for swallowing the entire Himalayas, and upon hearing that, Yu Chan-sok asked if all of this was for revenge. Sang-ah confirmed that it was, that she was doing it for her family. She made it clear that she wasn't asking for help for free, and handed him a business card from the KY Group, a company with a market capitalization of 257 trillion, belonging to her family. When he asked if she came from a wealthy family, she explained that the owner was her grandfather and that she had given up on the succession competition, saying it wouldn't make a difference to her. Even so, Yu Chan-sok thought that by trying to become a true hunter, she might end up getting involved in internal disputes and be seen as a threat in the family succession. He then remarked that she probably hadn't handed over the card by chance, and directly asked what she wanted in return. Sang-ah replied that she wanted to become stronger, and in exchange, offered elixiris, rare and hard-to-obtain items that were not normally distributed. She emphasized that he also sought to become stronger, and that with the resources she could provide, he would be able to reach whatever realm he desired. Yu Chan-sok thought that even if he told the truth, she probably wouldn't believe him, because the realm he sought had already been reached long ago, and everything he had done since was merely to gain enough power to return to his world. Even so, he shook her hand and said he didn't need that kind of reward, stating that he would ask for something much simpler in the future. For now, the most important thing was to get the van to a hospital. At the hospital, the doctor assessed the situation and informed them that there were 7 patients, and given their condition, it would take a few weeks for them to recover, promising to notify them once they regained consciousness. With that, he said they could rest. However, Yu Chan-sok already wanted to begin immediately, suggesting they start training right then, which caught Sang off guard, since they had just come out of a mission. Later, they went to a remote location, far from people and buildings, just to train. Before starting, Yu Chan-sok asked a direct question, wanting to know if he attacked with all his strength, she would be able to dodge. Sang-ah replied that she probably wouldn't, acknowledging the huge gap in power between them, but he disagreed, stating that she could so long as she used all her senses to their fullest. He explained that she needed to observe carefully with her eyes, listen attentively, feel the environment with her body, and fully master her senses, fighting consciously rather than unconsciously. Then he tested whether she had understood, and simply disappeared before her. Sang-ah didn't even have time to think, or choose which sense to rely on, and in the next instant, Yu Chan-sok's spear was already pressed against her neck as he pointed out her mistake, saying she had been too slow, and that in real combat there is no time to think, because the senses act before the mind. He emphasized that the senses exist precisely for that, to react automatically to danger, and that now it was time to put that into practice. Later, as police officers ran around trying to understand what was happening, everything around them trembled, and when they reached the hospital courtyard on the island, they realized it was simply the clash between the two hunters. Yu Chan-sok's spear strikes were tearing apart the field around them, while Sang-ah managed to block the attacks with her katana. She tried to counterattack, but he was already prepared to keep up the pressure, and the fight was only interrupted when a police officer showed up, calling their attention and informing them that the survivors had regained consciousness. At that moment, Sang-ah was was on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion, while Yu Chansok simply asked if they had woken up, and remarked that she had learned to block his strikes surprisingly fast, ending their first training session there. Sang-ah was surprised to realize that had only been the beginning. Meanwhile, one of the survivors, extremely thin and hooked up to an IV, reported that unless he had been hallucinating, a truck had appeared to take away some of the hostages who were not present when the rescuers arrived. He explained that they were kidnappers, humans working alongside the monsters, and that for some reason the monsters did not attack them, but instead helped them. According to his account, the zombies were carrying the hostages to the truck, which made Yu Chansok understand why they had only found 7 people. He commented that it was a good thing the survivor had managed to escape, since thanks to that they were able to save the others. But the man replied that he hadn't escaped, making it clear that they had actually let him go. Yu Chansok asked if that was really the case, saying he had already sensed something strange earlier, because it didn't make sense for an ordinary civilian to escape from a place overrun by zombies unless someone had allowed it, which suggested that he might not be just a civilian. Sang-ah raised the possibility that it might have been a trap set against them, but admitted it didn't seem to make much sense, and Yu Chansok replied that it was just a dirty trick, nothing more, calling those responsible audacious. Sang-ah wondered whether he was irritated at being underestimated or for another reason, perhaps because they had used living humans as bait, while Chansok stayed focused and asked the survivor if there was any other relevant information. The man confirmed that there was, and said he had seen the person who got out of the truck, someone who controlled the zombies, and that this individual had a pet cat. Later, at the airport, Sang-ah commented that she had discovered through her phone that the place's mascot was a cat, and Yu Chansok questioned how she had gotten that information, to which she replied sarcastically, asking if his phone was just for decoration. He shot back saying that unlike her, who was rich, ordinary people had to pay for mobile data, and that it was expensive, while she replied that sounded like something from the 2000s, since nowadays it was much cheaper. Even so, Sang-ah said she couldn't see or sense anyone nearby, and suggested returning to the sanctuary. But Yu Chansok said it wasn't necessary, as he had already spotted 2 people in the distance. One of them was standing there with a face full of piercings, and he made a mocking comment, asking if the guy had played too much with a nail gun. But despite the joke, he immediately realized that the woman was no ordinary person. The woman introduced himself as Kim Ji-hyun, and said his mission was to capture the 2 of them alive. She then grabbed the body of a man who was nearly dead on the ground, and said that demonstrating was better than explaining. She threw the body into a corrosion rift, and when the corpse came back, it had instantly transformed into a creature resembling a zombie. Kim Ji-hyun commented that it was a weak creature as expected, since the body itself was weak, and destroyed the monster with a kick. Sang-ah asked if she intended to do the same to them, but she replied that she couldn't waste ordinary people like that, since they didn't produce satisfactory results, making it clear that the hostages were not being used for money, but as test subjects. Even saying she didn't care about it, Kim Ji-hyun stated that she had been instructed to explain everything, so she began to say that they were descendants of Dangon, united by a single purpose, maintaining the strength and hegemony of South Korea, so that no one could oppose them. As she spoke, she demonstrated his power with a single blow, lifting cars and rocks around him, reinforcing the idea that the country needed to become an absolute superpower. Amid the display, Kim Ji-hyun kicked a car toward him, but Hyun-sok destroyed it mid-air before it could hit the airport, replying that in his view, the country already had enough power. Even so, she insisted it wasn't enough, stating that they would raise the nation to a level where no one would dare underestimate them, becoming an absolute and unshakable power. She then told them to think about the history of the Korean peninsula, recalling how, over time, the country had its wealth taken by stronger nations, and was forced to bow before powers like China and Japan, declaring that now was the time to repay all that humiliation. While listening, Chansok analyzed the situation and thought that his opponent was just a black belt taekwondo fighter, but even so, he realized she was much faster than he had imagined. She managed to land a clean kick on Chansok, sending him flying. He got back up, still slightly dazed, analyzing the situation, and realizing that although she was fast, her power was still something he could handle. At the same time, he began to understand her position a bit better, since if the rifts disappeared, it would become much harder for Korea to maintain its current standing, as much of the country's power came from the hunters. Within that line of thinking, she made it clear that she had no intention of saving the world. Chansok countered by pointing out that countless innocent people were being threatened and dying every day, asking whether it wouldn't be better to reconsider her priorities. But she replied that he was the type of person who knew nothing, explaining that there was already a way to control the rifts. That made him think more carefully, because if it were true, it would change everything. Even so, he reflected that if it were really possible to control corrosion rifts, things shouldn't be as chaotic as they were. Still, he even considered cooperating and asked how far that supposed control went. The answer was vague. They could control them enough, which only increased his suspicion. To Chansok, it sounded just like many others of the same kind. People who spoke well and seemed convincing, but never showed any real results. In the end, to him, they were nothing more than than frauds, pretending to fight for a good cause. That provocation was enough to irritate Kim Ji-hyun, who smashed the ground with a downward kick. Chansok realized he might have gone too far, but in truth, he had been stalling on purpose to buy time and accumulate mana in his glove. The problem was that the charge still wasn't complete, and he didn't have enough mana to use the Paradox Flames. Because of that, he decided that for the moment, the best option was a battle of attrition. But neither he nor Kim Ji-hyun expected Sang-a's intervention. Her attack was fast enough to slice off a few strands of Kim Ji-hyun's hair, who managed to dodge at the very last moment. Her reaction was one of surprise, questioning whether the girl truly wasn't afraid. Even so, it seemed Sang-a still had some courage left. Chansok commented that she wouldn't be able to defeat Kim Ji-hyun, but Sang-a replied that she had already seen the charge level of his glove and knew he needed time. When she asked how much time he needed, he answered that 5 minutes would be enough. Without hesitation, Sang-a drank one of her elixirs and took responsibility, beginning to concentrate electrical energy throughout her body. Chanseok grew concerned about the amount of refined elixir she had consumed, warning about the risk of overload, but she made it clear that it was for emergencies and that there was no other choice. He agreed, then set the plan. 5 minutes. After that, he would take over. Sang-a only asked him not to lose. Sometime later, a massive storm poured over the airport courtyard, making the scene even more chaotic. Kim Ji-hyun taunted her, telling the girl to take it easy or she might end up killing her own ally. Sang-a responded with action, delivering an electric strike that ran from her opponent's shoulder down to her legs. Even so, it didn't cause significant damage. In response, Kim Ji-hyun counterattacked with a spinning kick, and Chansok had to intervene at the last second to catch Sang-a. Next, Chansok faced his opponent and asked if she was ready to die. Kim Ji-hyun found it strange how much mana he was displaying in such a short time, suspecting that she was hiding his true strength. He, on the other hand, treated it as something obvious, explaining that he was using the same principle as her piercings. This surprised Kim Ji-hyun, who couldn't understand how she knew that. Chansok replied that anyone would notice, since a large amount of refined mana was leaking from her, something her body couldn't contain. From there, he revealed that he was taking advantage of that wasted mana to activate his own unique ability. Kim Ji-hyun rejected the idea, stating that there was no method to absorb mana like that, but before she could react, he was already behind her. Without offering any further explanation, he declared that she didn't need to understand, because she was going to die there. He then ended the fight in one go, executing the blue trajectory in a 16-hit combo. After that, Kim Ji-hyun could barely breathe. Her body felt like it was burning from the inside, her breathing failing, unable even to properly feel her own heartbeat. Chansok told her to give up, saying that continuing would only make her waste more mana and suffer even more, since he had practically burned all of her muscles. Even so, Kim Ji-hyun called out to the captain for help, and soon a sphere of mana struck Chansok in the chest. Though he still managed to remain standing, he tried to understand what had just happened. While the archer responsible for the attack was already preparing to act again, aiming to break his wrist, Chansok realized the attack was fast and precise, recognizing that his opponent had good instincts, and then questioned who he was, finding it even stranger that someone was using a bow and arrow in the present day. He wondered if that man was Kim Ji-hyun's captain. Based on the energy he felt, it made sense. In his view, the man truly deserved that title, as he seemed at least 2 or even 3 times stronger than her. Maintaining a firm stance, the archer remarked that Chansok had courage, that he didn't seem like someone who feared death. In response, Chansok made it clear that if he had truly wanted to kill him, he would have already done so. In his mind, that man wasn't there just to fight. There was another motive behind it, and everything pointed to his flames. When Chansok raised his fingers, the flames around Kim Ji-hyun intensified even more, increasing her suffering. Nearly out of strength, she begged for help, showing she was at her limit. The archer then demanded that he extinguish the flames immediately, making it clear he wouldn't repeat the request. Even hearing that, Chansok thought that if it were up to him, Kim Ji-hyun would have been dead long ago. Still, it became clear to him that that captain would not allow it. Deep down, he realized the archer was somehow keeping Kim Ji-hyun alive, sustaining her with his own energy, as if protecting someone important, almost like someone close, perhaps even like a sister. He remembered that arrow and realized that if it had been aimed at his head, he would already be dead, but the archer hadn't done that. Faced with this, Chanseok extinguished the black flames, and Kim Ji-hyun collapsed to the ground completely drained. The archer then acknowledged that he had done a good job. In Chanseok's mind, it became clear just how absurd that man's level was, as he reached Kim Jae-hyun in the blink of an eye. Then the archer questioned whether he understood what he had done to her, explaining that all of her muscles had been burned, and that in that state, she would likely spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair, dependent on machines. Even so, he made it clear that he needed Chanseok alive, but only alive, nothing more than that. Already preparing an arrow, he indicated that he wouldn't hesitate to incapacitate him. Chanseok in turn reacted with anger, telling him to go ahead and try, because he would rather die than become a puppet. The archer then lowered his weapon, saying he understood the principle behind those flames very well. He stated that at that moment, he had no choice but to keep the situation at a stalemate, but he made sure to leave a warning. When the rifts first appeared, no one even thought about controlling them, but he managed to do it, being the only one capable of such a feat. And according to him, sooner or later, Chanseok would also end up under his control. After the archer left, Chanseok reflected that he had crossed paths with someone he would rather never meet again. At that moment, Sang-ah struggled to stand, still shaken, asking asking if they were after his unique ability. He replied that apparently they were, but he didn't know why. She then pointed out that they could have used her as a hostage, since she had been unconscious, but Chansok assumed they probably knew about her past. Even so, Sang-ah questioned it, since terrorists normally wouldn't care about something like that. Chansok told her to think calmly, saying that that group had clear objectives and might not even be in conflict with the Korean government. On the contrary, there was a possibility they were receiving some kind of support. Faced with that, Sang-ah suggested that maybe they shouldn't destroy that rift. Chansok replied that they could simply pretend they hadn't seen anything, although he knew she wasn't good at lying. In the end, he decided to leave the consequences for later, stating that they would deal with that rift regardless of what happened. He then told her to wait there while he went in alone. Sang-ah still asked if he would be okay, and he replied that he would only know once he got down there, telling her to rest until he returned. Upon entering the Rank 2 Tsushima Rift, Chonseok came across a massive imperial palace. Grand and imposing, he touched the structures and analyzed the environment, realizing that even though it was formed by the undead, the place was far more durable than it should have been. On top of that, he felt such an intense energy that it even caused pain in his lungs. Without needing to advance much, he already suspected that the core lay beyond those massive doors. He knew it wasn't the ideal mindset before a battle, but he was also aware that letting his guard down there, even for an instant, could cost him his life. As he crossed the main hall, he found a large cauldron emitting an absurd amount of power that seemed to be the rift's core, although it was different from what he had expected. Then something unexpected happened. Someone grabbed his leg, begging for help, saying they could no longer move. Before he could react, a tentacle emerged from the cauldron and pulled the person inside. The screams lasted only a few seconds, until the body was completely evaporated by the energy present there. Soon after, that same person returned as an undead. Faced with that, Chansok realized they were using living humans as raw material. The scene brought back memories of his past life, of people being burned and begging for help. It made his stomach churn, nearly causing him to vomit. With disgust, he concluded that humans could truly be revolting. At that moment, a presence approached. A specter appeared, stating that yet another sacrifice had arrived. However, this one was different from the others. According to him, Chansok carried a familiar energy, the energy of a warrior. The specter himself revealed that he had also once been a warrior, a ronin. He then asked Chanseok to draw his weapon, saying he wanted to strengthen his blade with his blood. Chansok felt the overwhelming pressure of the place, and concluded that this was indeed the power of a rank 2 core. The energy was so intense that it sent chills through his entire body. As he analyzed the surroundings, he wondered whether that hooded figure had defeated the creature alone and taken control of the rift, and how the hell someone could even accomplish something like that. At that moment, the specter told him to pay attention to the blade. Even so, Chansok concluded that the hooded figure was probably not at that level, which only meant that their leader was even more powerful. Before he could think further, he had to dodge at the last instant from a sword strike by the specter, realizing in practice just how fast that enemy was. The specter himself remarked that he had lived quite a long time, while Chansok drew his spear and thought of a simple strategy against an enemy far stronger. The ideal approach was to end everything with a single strike before discovering their weakness. He advanced with full force, but the specter already seemed to anticipate it and blocked the attack. This left Chanseok in shock, not only because his strongest blow had been stopped, but because he hadn't even seen the movement the enemy made. The specter explained that subtle attacks should not be seen, and indeed, everything had happened far too quickly. In the next instant, Chansok tried to dodge but was still grazed by the sword. Even though it was only a light cut, it made it clear that he was not prepared for the enemy's speed. The specter acknowledged that he was doing well, since he could avoid fatal blows, but then followed up with an even more violent sequence, telling him to try and block it. The attacks came too fast. Chansok couldn't properly react. He only endured as much as he could until he fell to his knees, bleeding. Even so, he leaned on his spear, forced himself to stand, and activated the paradox flames to heal. He knew he was using his ability too early, and worse, it didn't work against the specter, since it was not a living being. Not knowing exactly what to do, he kept fighting. The specter, in turn, seemed intrigued, saying that he was a real box of surprises and that he wanted to see how far he could go. Then he continued attacking relentlessly. Each blow left Chansok more injured. He could no longer counterattack properly. His body felt heavy, his vision blurred, and he nearly collapsed from dizziness. Even so, he used the flames repeatedly to stay on his feet and lunged with his spear whenever he found an opening. At one point, he felt as if he had lost consciousness for a few seconds. Even so, for some reason the specter did not kill him. That gave Chanseok enough time to heal again with the paradox flames. When he realized it, he was behind his enemy, believing he finally had a chance to end it. But the moment he blinked, the specter was already behind him, saying he had been too slow. The next attack nearly struck him directly, but it grazed past the side of Chanseok's head, drawing some blood. Even so, he reacted and managed to throw the enemy away. The specter remarked that, considering he had missed, the boy was quite lucky. Irritated, Chansok realized he was being kept alive on purpose and demanded an answer, asking why he was doing that, why he was merely playing with him. The specter then replied that he really could have killed him if he were still who he once was, but in his current state, he couldn't even remember his own name. Most of the memories from his life had been lost, and that directly affected his techniques and strength. Because of those flaws, he had been defeated and chained there by someone else. He explained that he had been treated like a dog, bound by something like a collar. Hearing that, Chansok understood the situation. The body was still there, but the experience and memories had vanished, the opposite of what had happened to him, who had lost his body but kept his knowledge. In Chansok's mind, it became clear that that collar must be some kind of ability belonging to that mysterious enemy, something capable of controlling people. The spectral swordsman continued, saying he had lost almost everything: his name, his memories, and even the reason he wielded a sword. All that remained within him was resentment and sorrow. Suddenly, the specter vanished into the air, consumed by spectral flames. Right after, a black eye appeared above them, formed from the cauldron's power, watching everything like a moon. The specter itself now seemed fused with the shadows, and that gaze taking on an even more dangerous form. Chansok realized that the swordsman's resentment had grown even stronger, but he also noticed that, despite that, the specter had still lost a significant portion of his technique and experience. That meant that if he could finish everything in a single blow, there was still a chance of victory. To do that, he would need to use all his power without worrying about the cost. He then began to accumulate the paradox flames within his own body, using them both for recovery and to amplify his strength. Watching this, the specter commented that it was quite a peculiar ability. The black flames seemed to burn something beyond the physical. Chansok confirmed it, saying that those flames burned concepts. He knew it sounded like an almost limitless power, but it wasn't that simple. The greater the concept he tried to affect, the higher the mana consumption, and the harder it was to control. That was why, until then, he had been using the flames cautiously, avoiding excess. He even recalled that when he defeated Kim Ji-hyun, he had to control himself carefully, so as not to completely destroy her body. If he were still in the other world, that wouldn't have been a problem, but here he needed precision. But now was not the time to hold back. Chansok decided he would burn the durability of the entire place. The specter found that strange, but before he could understand, Chansok sprang into action. His speed increased drastically, allowing him to land a direct strike and tear off one of the enemy's arms. Without giving him time to react, he kept up the pressure, saying that the specter could figure things out while getting beaten. In his mind, that confirmed that the enemy had limits, and that was exactly what he needed. At the same time, he was also curious to see how much his own body could endure. The specter realized that the palace was being corroded, as its durability was literally being burned away by the flames. Faced with that, he decided to change the battlefield. The two moved outside, exchanging increasingly violent blows. During the clash, after several impacts, the swordsman managed to break Chansok's spear in half. Then he delivered a slash so powerful that it split the distant mountains. Even so, Chansok remained standing. Holding half of the spear, he charged forward like a comet, accompanied by blue lines and echoes of attacks, unleashing a relentless barrage of strikes. The specter's body was pierced by countless holes in the shadows. Surprised, he admitted he had never faced anything like that, not even in his past life, and tried to ask what exactly Chansok was, but he didn't have time to finish. Another attack came like a comet, and Chansok drove the spear into him, followed by multiple blue lines that split the specter's body over and over again. He tried to regenerate, tried to react, but couldn't keep up. Over time, the shadows began to dissipate, revealing only what remained of that man without a name, without memories, and without purpose. Even so, the two continued fighting until their bodies reached their limits. In the middle of that final clash, the flames completely destroyed the palace. At that moment, Chansok remembered his past life, of a conversation where he was asked what he would do when facing an enemy impossible to defeat. The answer was simple: if two warriors of similar level clashed, inevitably one of them would die, and that was exactly what happened. After the final blow, Chansok fell to his knees, exhausted. Under the sunlight, the specter vanished completely. Even so, almost without strength, he declared that, as expected, he was the strongest. When everything ended, the shadows disappeared, and in the place where the enemy had been, a chest appeared. It brought a familiar feeling to Chansok, as its function was identical to that of the other world he came from. When he opened the chest, he found a spear with a large blade and a short shaft, almost like a glaive. As he examined it, he realized he could extend the shaft using mana, making the weapon extremely versatile and useful in combat. He also remembered that rift rewards usually varied depending on the number of participants. Because of that, he thought it might have been a good idea to bring Sang-ar along just to secure more rewards. Even so, when he looked around, he noticed that the specter's sword was still intact. Without hesitation, he decided to take it as a gift for Sang-a. When he finally returned to the devastated airport, Sang-a Jua was there, sleeping heavily. She only woke up when a sword was thrown beside her. Still a bit confused, she realized it was a blade, and commented that she had never seen one like that before. Chansok explained that he had found it along the way, and that, judging by the man who used it, it had to be a good weapon. Sang-a, taking a closer look, replied that it was actually an excellent sword. She thanked him, but soon grew curious, asking where he had gotten it, whether it had been inside the rift, and also whether he was okay. He responded somewhat indifferently, and quickly changed the subject, asking if she had rested well, because now they would review shifts and it would be his turn to rest. But as soon as he finished speaking, Chansok suddenly collapsed face first onto the concrete. Sang-a immediately realized that he had passed out, commenting that in the end he was still human. That made it clear just how absurd the difference between a rank 2 and rank 3 rift was, practically immeasurable. Because of that, when the news that Chansok had single-handedly cleared a rank 2 corrosion rift became public. The impact was enormous. It wasn't just another impressive feat, it was on a whole different level. Everyone started talking about it, trying to figure out who he was. His face was everywhere, on big screens, in the news, in newspapers, practically impossible to avoid. He began receiving so many notifications and messages that he couldn't even tell what was truly important anymore. The situation became so chaotic that he couldn't even leave his house, as there were always people gathered around the building. It was during this time that Ja Soo-jaegon, from the Embargo Tower Secretariat, showed up at his home. Chan-sok thanked her for covering the hospital expenses, but admitted he was surprised, since he had never heard of the Embargo Tower before. Ja Soo-jaegon explained that this was normal, as the organization wasn't widely known to the public, mainly because it operated in the field of information and communication technology. She also mentioned that if he felt any discomfort during his stay, he could let them know at any time. However, Chan-seok said he was more curious about something else, since the medical expenses were clearly not cheap, and asked directly whether they wanted something from him. Without answering directly, Ja Soo-jaegon brought out a small cake and asked if he liked it. Then she began explaining about a shield generator, a device capable of creating a barrier to defend against corrosion creatures. Jin-sok understood that the job would be to transport this device, and she confirmed it, explaining that it was a prototype developed in the United States. She continued, saying that if the project succeeded and went into mass production, it could greatly ease the situation in areas where hunters were unable to operate. It was an extremely important mission, with the potential to change the fate of humanity. Chan-seok then asked if this was part of a large-scale request, and Ja Soo-jaegon confirmed, saying that other hunters were also being recruited. The Jonabi Guild had already agreed to participate, which made him realize that the operation was much bigger than it initially seemed. She explained that the shield generator would be transported by train after departing from Vladivostok and arriving in the Netherlands. From there, it would be immediately sent by helicopter to Dover, in the United Kingdom, where it would undergo testing. Chan-so questioned why the final destination was the United Kingdom, and Ja Soo-jaegon explained that one of the major powers was located in Naples, Italy, with influence spreading across Europe all the way to North Africa. In the end, the only place still truly standing was the United Kingdom, precisely because it was protected by the sea. She also explained that Europe was practically in collapse, with governments failing, and regions being controlled by corporations and hunters like warlords. Because of that, in addition to the generator, they would also be transporting humanitarian aid supplies at the request of international organizations. Chan-sok immediately recognized the risk and asked if that meant many people would try to attack the train. Ja Soo-jaegon confirmed, making it clear that it would be an extremely dangerous mission, and asked if he had ever traveled abroad before. He replied that he hadn't, that it would be his first time in Europe, but he already expected to encounter some harsh situations there. He then asked if she would also be part of the mission, and Ja Soo-jaegon said yes. She explained that data collection and analysis were under the responsibility of the Embargo Tower, and that she would be part of the deployed team. At the very least, he would have a familiar face nearby. Chan-sok noticed that she spoke as if he had already accepted the mission. After giving a bit more attention to the cake, he finally said he had one condition. He wanted the hunter Sang-ah to go with them. Then he clarified himself, asking if they were talking about the same person who had accompanied him on Tsushima Island. He confirmed that it was indeed her, explaining that he had made a promise, and that he trusted her as a true friend. Even so, Ja Soo-jaegon questioned whether he really trusted her that much, since in the end it was up to them, not him, to invite her to the mission. Still, she thanked him, acknowledging that it wasn't a bad request for her either, and greeted Chan-sok, saying she hoped they would work well together. Later, they were already departing from Korea. During the trip, he commented to the president that it felt strange to mobilize a helicopter just to pick him up, and that it clearly showed how clearing a rank 2 or rank 3 rift truly made a difference. The president confirmed it, saying that the difference was indeed enormous. It was a moment when the expectations they had about him turned into surprise, and the association made it clear that they would do everything possible to support his activities. Chan-seok was glad to hear that, since now it wasn't just an impression, it was concrete proof that his abilities made things much easier in that world. Even so, he wondered whether the president knew about those individuals who could control rifts, and how he would react if he did, whether he would support them or try to stop them. That thought lingered in his mind until he boarded the helicopter and encountered the hunter Lee Se-yoon. She commented that rumors about him had spread far, and he replied that at that point, it was harder to find someone who didn't know who he was. Taking the opportunity, he asked where they were heading, and Lee Se-thigan explained that it was to a military base, since they also planned to take part in the Embargo Tower's mission. Chan-sok admitted that it made sense, because when it came to a shield generator, it would be hard to find any country that wouldn't be interested. If it worked, reliance on hunters for national defense would decrease significantly. Even so, from Korea's perspective, that might not be so appealing. Soon after, he asked if Lee Se-yoon knew an organization called the Descendants of Dangun. She confirmed that she did, describing it as an ultra-nationalist terrorist group, and said she was surprised he knew about them. Chan-seok explained that he had encountered members of that group during the mission on Tsushima Island. Lee Se-yoon then said that the Descendants of Dangun, composed only of Koreans, had been appearing in various places, mainly interfering when hunters were clearing rifts. He replied that he could understand what they were trying to protect, and even the reasoning behind their mindset, even if he didn't fully agree with it. At that moment, Lee Se-yoon handed him a pumpkin candy, which confused him, but she explained by asking if he he had ever traveled abroad. He replied that he hadn't, that it was his first time going so far, and realized that he was already the second person to ask him that. Lee Si-yoon commented that this mission would likely make him see many things differently, and could change the way he viewed the world. When they finally arrived at the military base, the briefing began with everyone involved. Each person received briefing materials, while Superintendent Hun So led the explanation. He detailed that the train would have 80 cars, with 65 designated for cargo and other functions, while the remaining 15 would be used as living quarters for the hunters and the Korean army to rest. Chan Seok noticed that Lee Si-en would have an entire car just for herself, which clearly showed the special treatment given to someone in the top 10. The superintendent explained that it made sense, since she would be directly responsible for protecting the shield generator, and that only a small group of hunters would have access to that car. He also mentioned that due to the long journey and fatigue, they might try to organize patrols or rotations with the army. However, Lee Si-ryun interrupted, making it clear that the Janabi Guild was responsible for the generator and that the army should not be directly involved, emphasizing that no one besides them could approach the device. The superintendent accepted her stance and continued the briefing, explaining that the train would pass through several corrosion zones, 7 of which were classified as alpha and posed a real threat. In addition, there would be the risk of attacks from bandits and warlords, who were considered the greatest threat. Lee Se-yoon commented sarcastically, comparing the situation to an old Western movie, as if they were dealing with train robbers. The superintendent explained that they had tried to contact the warlords of Europe, but only 3 out of 8 had responded, which meant that at least 5 could be hostile. Chansok realized that the number of enemies was large, and one of the soldiers even questioned how many adversaries they would face, considering corrosion creatures, bandits, and independent forces. Concern began to grow among those present, with some doubting whether it would be possible to complete the journey. Even so, Lee Se-yoon remained confident, stating that she would guarantee the train's safety no matter what happened. With that, the day of departure finally arrived. They were already in Russia, at Vladivostok Station, with several teams working on preparing the carriages and organizing everything for the trip. Chansok, wearing a new coat, walked along the enormous train, which was about a kilometer long, trying to reach first class. On the way, Sang-ah appeared and reminded him of the promise he had made, saying that once the mission was over, they would still need to deal with those elixirs. Surprised, Chansok asked when she had arrived, since he hadn't even noticed her presence until that moment. She replied that he had been in a luxury car, so of course he hadn't seen anything. Chansok commented that he hadn't seen Lee Se-yoon either, realizing that everyone there seemed to be receiving special treatment. At that moment, Ja Soo-jigon appeared, saying they had finally arrived, and suggesting they take a look at the train. Chansok agreed, thinking it was a good idea. Even though he had just arrived, he remarked that it was clear the embargo tower had put a lot of effort into all of this. Observing the structures, he noticed the reinforced doors, and commented that the security seemed practically unbreakable. Still, he questioned whether that wouldn't draw too much attention. Ja Soo-jigon explained that even if it did attract attention, it was much safer that way, since the train had been built with uranium armor, similar to that used in military vehicles. Chansok thought that with that level of protection, and with Lee Se-yoon also taking part in the mission, it wasn't like they were going to fail. But that confidence didn't last long. Later, in carriage 57, one of the hunters appeared, desperately asking for help. He was already completely covered in blood when Chansok ran toward him with his spear in hand, thinking that only 10 minutes had passed since departure, and this was already happening. Without wasting time, he began swinging his spear, cutting down the flying creatures that kept approaching non-stop. Even while fighting, he realized there was no end, that the monsters kept appearing. At that moment, he thought everything would be much easier if Lee Se-yoon were there with them. It was then explained that the Trans-Siberian Railway was currently damaged. For the train to keep moving forward, it was necessary to repair the tracks along the way. The problem was that the team responsible for repairs didn't have the ability to face the creatures on their own. That was why Lee Se-yoon was positioned at the rear, protecting that group. Chansok found that absurd, thinking they had placed the best fighter in a single spot, while the rest dealt with chaos. In his view, decisions like that could end up costing lives. Looking up at the sky filled with creatures, he realized that it would be an extremely long day. Later, in Khabarovsk, Russia, some warlords were also hunting creatures in a practical and efficient way, clearing their own territories. Among them, an Asian man appeared to speak with a European fighter, saying he had an interesting job, something only he could do. This man was Nikolai Baranov, known as the Lord of Khabarovsk. He commented that his food had already been cleaned, but that the visitor had ended up awakening more monsters. The Korean replied simply, telling him to clean the blood first, and even questioned whether that was really common food in Russia. Nikolai Baranov responded that Koreans had become arrogant, probably because they had more food options, and soon asked what the job was, making it clear he didn't need money. The Korean said he knew that, but assured him he would find the job interesting. He then explained that a train would pass along those tracks in 1 or 2 days. Nikolai Baranov thought it was a joke since the Trans-Siberian Railway tracks were destroyed. The Korean explained that among the awakened, there were some capable of repairing the path as they advanced. Curious, Nikolai Baranov asked what the train was transporting. The Korean replied that this was not the most important thing, but rather who would be protecting the cargo, the Janabi Guild. Upon hearing that, he immediately asked if that woman would also be present, and the Korean confirmed it. Nikolai Baranov then commented that taking down a train protected by by Lee So-seon sounded quite entertaining. The Korean corrected him, saying it wasn't a simple robbery. He explained that Janabi had been hired to protect a specific carriage. Nikolai Baranov asked if that meant he could just destroy everything, but the Korean denied it, saying that wasn't the plan. He handed over a device and explained that the task was simple: enter the correct carriage and install the device. Nothing more. After that, Nikolai Baranov asked if he could destroy everything however he wanted, and the Korean replied that yes, he could do whatever he preferred afterward. With that, he accepted the job, but made it clear that he didn't intend to just destroy the cargo. He wanted to kill all the hunters there, right in front of Lee Se-yoon, just to prove that she wouldn't be able to do anything to stop him. Everyone there was confused, wondering if he really was a rookie who had just become a hunter, and that he seemed more like a monster than any of them. Chan-sok said he had already taken care of everything. He thought that they had barely started and were already exhausted. They were useless, and he should just assume he was fighting alone. Sang-ah appeared and told everyone to get up, saying they couldn't let their guard down. Chan-sok thought she was the only useful one there, but then he noticed something ahead and asked if there had been an avalanche. They replied that it was the control room and that they had identified an obstacle on the tracks, but everything was proceeding normally. However, Lee Se-yoon interrupted, ordering them to stop the train immediately, saying it was the enemy. The enemy fired a powerful laser in her direction, but she deflected it with ease and sent it upward. Sang-ah wondered who those people were, and Chan-sok said there was only one group near Khabarovsk that would do something like that: the armed gang of Nikolai. They then threw several seals at Lee Se-yoon's shield, causing interference in the barrier. Sang-ah asked if she was okay, and Lee Se-yoon replied that her powers had been sealed. She called the attention of all the hunters, saying they were under attack from the side of the train, that the commander was unable to fight, and that the estimated number of enemies was 510 times their combat strength. She added that even without her, they would defend the train at all costs. Chan-sok told Sang-ah to follow him, then jumped off the train. The others wondered if he was crazy, since it was 50 against 500, but they all decided to go as well, since they couldn't let a rookie do everything alone. Lee Se-yeon said she would return to the front lines as soon as possible, but then a man appeared, saying it wouldn't be that easy. She asked if the seal was his doing. He introduced himself as Lee Ha-yeon, a descendant of Dangun, also of the lineage of Prince Yeon-young, which made him her distant nephew. He found it strange to meet a relative in a foreign land. Even so, Lee Se-shun tried to attack with her sword, but it broke easily. Ha-shun said the seal wouldn't break so easily, and that it would be better for her to surrender. She asked why he was so confident. The sword had only broken. Then she spun her ring, and the sword regenerated to its previous state. The system revealed it was a mirror ring, an artifact she obtained after eliminating a level 1 erosion core. It could record a piece of equipment at the moment it broke. Ha-yoon asked if she planned to keep breaking the sword so brutally until the seal shattered, and she continued striking the barrier with it. Switching back to Chan-sok, one of the enemy soldiers questioned their ridiculously small numbers and ordered them to surrender, saying he would spare their lives. Chan-sok asked if he was Nikolai, since he couldn't sense any mana from him even though he was flying. Sang-ah explained that the suit had been created 10 years ago during the Predator project, and was designed to allow people to fight without using mana. She added that the South Korean army had made some prototypes for testing, but the project was shelved because the materials were too expensive. Chan-sok wondered what something like that was doing in the hands of a Russian boss. Sang-ah wondered if she would really have to kill people, and whether she would be able to do it. Chan-sok told her that if she couldn't, she should just fall back, and he would handle the rest. But Sang-ah pointed out that even he hadn't fought humans before, and besides, they were trying to kill them by any means, so they were no different from entities. Chan-sok then slit the throat of one of them, who had nearly struck Sang-ah. He told her to do the same if she could, but not to let the guilt consume her. It would pass in a few days, months, or years. It didn't matter to him. Chan-sok thought he could hear screams, weapons clashing, guts and blood spilling, and he found it truly disgusting, especially because someone like him felt at home in that chaos. He reflected that they had the advantage in combat skill, but were outnumbered, and the enemy's momentum was pushing them back. There was only one way to turn things around: take down Nikolai. Nikolai quickly recognized Chan-sok, asking if he was the rookie from Korea. Chan-sok was surprised that some Russian lackeys knew who he was. Nikolai tried to attack him, but Chan-sok blocked it instantly. Nikolai looked disappointed and asked if Korea was that desperate. Chan-sok realized Nikolai was both fast and strong, and his suit was so durable it didn't even get scratched. This wouldn't be an easy fight, at least not if he hadn't gone to Tsushima Island. In the next moment, Chan-sok sent Nikolai flying backward. Furious, Nikolai shouted that he would end this right away and fired his lasers at Chan-sok. He dodged and wondered if Nikolai was holding back his firepower. He couldn't understand why. Was he worried about damaging the shield generator? Maybe that earlier attack had only been meant to stop the train. If Lee Se-yoon hadn't been there, the train would have been reduced to fragments, so perhaps they already knew the attack would be deflected. He realized there were too many suspicious elements, from a Russian using Korean military equipment to the sudden appearance of a sealing master. Chan-sok ignited flames around his armor, thinking he would burn through its durability and finish this quickly. He struck Nikolai's shoulder, then used his 16-hit combo technique, dealing multiple blows in rapid succession. He noticed a crack forming in the suit and knew he needed to keep up the pressure. Nikolai tried to persuade Chan-sok, saying he needed to break the shield and that he could help, but Chan-sok ignored him and split him in half, saying he didn't need his help. He added that Lee Se-yoon could handle things on her own. A few hours hours later, all the enemy soldiers were dead. Lee Seorin told Chanseok he had done a good job and had even exceeded her expectations. Chanseok asked if that man had been one of Dangun's descendants, and she confirmed it, adding that he had fled long before she broke the seal. As Chanseok went to grab something to eat, the others questioned why he was acting like that and asked if he was crazy. He asked why they were being so strange, but Lee Seo-chain said only he could eat something at a time like that. In any case, Chanseok noticed soldiers trying to recover the equipment, since Nikolai had obtained specialized gear used by the Korean army. To be able to move around with such equipment, he would need either a powerful faction capable of ignoring the Korean government, or a Korean government that was already tolerating Nikolai's actions. Chanseok wondered if he could really trust them. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Ha-yun had a headache from overusing mana. He told his captain he had failed, but the captain said it was inevitable to stumble, and told him to forget about today and focus on recovery. In an elevator, the captain expressed surprise that Lee Ha-yun had been defeated after Kim Ji-han. He felt as if his heart were being torn apart, thinking that if he had recognized Chanseok's pattern of black flames earlier, he would have killed him on the spot. He then went to a laboratory, where a doctor named Seo Gyun-woo was working. He asked what he was doing there and inquired about the progress of that thing. Gyun-woo said it would take time, but he believed it was possible, though the need for a large budget and time hadn't changed. He also remarked that it was a shame they hadn't discovered the principles behind the shield generator, as it would have been useful, but the other man told him not to worry, since their journey across Siberia would be a long one.